I found the record button by accident. The dash cam, the old rectangular unit bolted to the windshield above the mirror, the one the department bought in 2019 and updated maybe twice. It has a separate audio recording function I didn't know about. There's a little button on the side, red rubber, and I must have hit it leaning over to check the mirror angle when the traffic first stopped. I didn't know it was running until I played back about 40 minutes of me saying nothing, just engine noise and the sound of me tapping my ring finger on the steering wheel. Old habit. I don't wear the ring anymore, but the finger still moves. So I'm leaving it on. I don't have a good reason. I've been doing this job long enough to know you document everything, always, because something is always someone else's fault, and you want the record on your side. That instinct doesn't just go away because civilization is apparently collapsing. My name is Raymond Coulter, Transport Officer, Corrections Division, 18 years, badge number 7741. I'm recording this because, I don't know, because the camera was already running, because I've got nothing else to do right now except sit here and wait and think. And thinking without talking is starting to make the inside of my skull feel smaller than it is. It is, or it was. I had a watch until about 3 days ago. It was the 14th of August, a Thursday, that much I'm sure of. The rest of it I'm going to have to piece together. Here's what the morning looked like before everything went wrong. I pulled the bus out of the depot at 6:40 a.m. Standard run. 6 inmates, 2 guards, 1 driver, me, heading up Route 9 to Harwell State Correctional Facility, which is about 140 miles north and a little east, past the town of Belden, past the Oaks River overpass, past 3 rest stops that are always slightly depressing, even when the world isn't ending. I'd done this run 17 times before. I could do it half asleep. The inmates were Tyler Roach, 34, armed robbery, 8 years left on his sentence. Brett Aldis, 41, aggravated assault, big guy, the kind of big that makes the seat frame creak when he shifts. Kevin Shoup, 52, fraud, specifically embezzlement from a hedge fund, which in prison earns you a certain kind of hatred that's different from the hatred you get for, say, robbery, because it's the kind of crime other inmates can't respect even if they wanted to. Doug Farley, 29, drug trafficking, calm in a way that felt practiced, like he'd decided a long time ago that nothing was worth reacting to. Aaron Tillett, 38, vehicular manslaughter, hit a cyclist on a Tuesday afternoon, on a road he drove every day, 0.14 BAC. The cyclist was 19 years old. Aaron knew the cyclist's name. He'd said it once during a transport 2 years earlier, and I hadn't asked him to elaborate. And then Carla Weeks, 44, attempted murder, her husband, with a kitchen knife, 3 stab wounds. He'd survived. She was the first one to notice the traffic stopping. She was sitting in the window seat in row 3, and she said, very quietly, "That's strange," and I had already been thinking the same thing. The guards were Pete Harlan and Jimmy Doss. Pete had been doing this job 11 years, which meant he was still technically newer than me, but had stopped thinking of himself that way sometime around year 4. He was reliable. That's the nicest and most complete thing I can say about Pete. He showed up. He did his job. He didn't say stupid things. Jimmy was younger, 27, 3 years in, the kind of guy who thought corrections work would look good on an application to the state police, which he'd been saying for 3 years. He was okay. That was the whole bus. 9 people, 1 vehicle. Route 9 northbound, mile marker 44, stuck in traffic at 8:17 in the morning, 8:17 a.m. Traffic happens on Route 9, but not like this. It's not a commuter route. It's a state road that connects 3 medium-sized towns and runs mostly through agricultural land. And the biggest traffic event I'd ever seen on it was a tractor that had dumped a load of silage across both lanes back in 2021. Even that had cleared in 40 minutes. This was different. The cars ahead of me had just stopped. Not slowed and then stopped, the way traffic does when something's ahead. They stopped the way cars stop when the driver gets out and walks away, like the vehicles had just been left. I could see maybe 60, 70 cars stretched out ahead of me on the straight section before the road curved left, and none of them were moving. And in a lot of them, I could see people sitting there, and a few people standing outside their cars looking at their phones. I put the bus in park. Pete came up from the back. What's going on? Don't know yet. I had the radio on. The CB, not the corrections radio, and there was nothing on it but some truckers from much further up the highway, talking about a detour. The corrections radio was running its normal traffic. Dispatch had nothing for me. I cracked the window. The August heat came in immediately. That solid wall of warm air that smells like asphalt and cut grass, and sometimes, this far out, a little bit of manure from the fields. Not unpleasant to me. I grew up in a town that smelled like this. You hearing anything? Pete asked. Not yet. I called dispatch. They said they had no reports of incidents on Route 9. I said that was interesting, because I was looking at about a quarter mile of stopped traffic. They said they'd look into it. That was the last normal thing that happened. 8:31 a.m. 14 minutes of sitting there. The radio was picking up something now. Not the CB, the regular AM. And it was fragmentary and strange. Emergency broadcast tones, then a voice that started giving instructions about sheltering in place in Cartwell County, and Cartwell County was 30 miles south of where I was sitting, which didn't make immediate sense to me. Then the voice cut out, and there was just the tone. Kevin Shoup had his face against the mesh divider behind me. Officer Coulter. I didn't turn around. Sit back, Shoup. Something's wrong with the radio. I'm aware. I've heard that tone before. My cousin works for the county emergency office. That specific tone sequence is Shoupe. I turned around that time. Sit. Back. He sat back. But I turned the radio up. The tone was the standard emergency broadcast tone, but running longer than normal, and when the voice came back, it wasn't the automated voice. It was someone reading from a paper. You could tell by the slightly disconnected pacing. And what they were saying was, residents of Cartwell County and surrounding areas should avoid contact with individuals displaying, and here they paused, aggressive or erratic behavior, disorientation, and visible injuries. Emergency services were responding. Do not approach affected individuals. Jimmy Doss came up to the front. He was 27, and he was not good at hiding what his face was doing. His face was doing a lot. What does that mean? Affected individuals? Could be chemical, Pete said from behind him. Gas leak. Something in the water. Could be, I said. I didn't think it was a gas leak. I'd been reading things. Not professionally. Not obsessively, but I read. 2 months earlier there had been some reports coming out of the southeastern states about a hemorrhagic fever that was being handled, contained, addressed. The usual language that means it's worse than they're saying. 6 weeks before this day, I had read a piece in a journal I subscribed to digitally, a criminology journal that sometimes ran public health cross-sections. And the piece was about disease vectors in correctional facilities, and it mentioned, in 2 sentences buried in a footnote, a pathogen that was being studied for its neurological effects, specifically its effect on impulse control and pain threshold, specifically in cases where the infection had progressed to a late stage. I had not done anything with that information. I had driven this route. I had gone home to my apartment. I had eaten cereal for dinner twice that week, because I hadn't gone to the store. And now I was sitting on a bus on a stopped highway in August, listening to an emergency broadcast that didn't say what it actually meant. 8:49 a.m. A woman got out of a sedan about 8 cars ahead of me. She walked to the edge of the lane, looked down the road, pulled out her phone. Normal. Then the man who got out of the car behind hers walked into her and knocked her sideways. Not aggressively, more like he hadn't seen her at all, like she wasn't there. And he kept walking north along the shoulder, with his arms at his sides and his head down. She said something to him. He didn't respond. He walked until I couldn't see him anymore around the curve in the road. Pete, I said. I see it. What do you think? He didn't answer right away. In the back of the bus, someone said, "Hey, what's happening out there?" That was Tyler Roach. Not aggressive, genuinely curious. "Nothing," Pete said. That didn't look like nothing. "Aldous, tell Roach to sit down." "I'm already sitting," Roach said. More people were getting out of their cars now. Not a lot, but enough. And the thing I noticed, the thing that made the back of my neck feel wrong, was that none of them were talking to each other. Usually when traffic stops and people get out, they congregate. They stand in small groups and shrug and look at their phones and point up the road. This wasn't that. These people were getting out and then drifting, just sort of moving without apparent purpose, and a few of them were moving in ways that looked stiff, like they'd slept wrong, like their joints weren't working right. I started the bus again. "What are you doing?" Jimmy asked. "I'm going to pull onto the shoulder." "We can't do that with inmates aboard. There's protocol." "The protocol," I said, and I heard my own voice go flat in a way it goes flat sometimes that stops people mid-sentence. "Was written when this was a traffic situation. I don't think this is a traffic situation anymore." Jimmy looked at Pete. Pete looked at the window. "Pull onto the shoulder," Pete said. I pulled onto the shoulder. 9:04 a.m. I'd moved us about 40 feet forward along the shoulder before I had to stop again. There was a pickup truck diagonally blocking the shoulder, and beyond it a car with its door open, and beyond that a woman lying on the asphalt next to her car with someone leaning over her. I thought, someone helping. Then the person leaning over her stood up and turned toward the bus, and I saw his face. You have to understand, I've worked in corrections for 18 years. I've seen people who've been in fights, people who've hurt themselves, people who were sick and being transported and didn't look good. I have a pretty wide baseline for what a human face can look like and still be a living person in some recoverable condition. This man's face was not in that range. He was bleeding from his right eye, actively, a slow dark seep that had gone down his cheek and dried in streaks to his jaw. His mouth was open. His skin had a gray-white look to it, not pale human, more like the color of paper that's been left in a damp room. And he was looking at the bus, but not at me specifically, not at the windows, just at the bus. He cocked his head to one side, very slowly, the way a dog does when it hears a sound it can't place. Then he started walking toward us. "Pete?" I said. "Yeah? That woman on the ground, is she moving?" Pete pressed his face to the glass. 30 seconds. "No," he said. From the back of the bus, Carla Weeks said, "There's more of them coming from the field on my side." I looked in the right mirror. There were 3 of them at the fence line. One was already through the gap in the fence, moving through the dry grass toward the road. They moved wrong, not slow exactly, not fast, but like they were navigating by some internal signal I couldn't see. Jerky corrections in direction, heads forward. "We're going to go," I said. "I need people to sit down, and I need it right now." "Where are we going?" Jimmy's voice had gone up a register. "There are cars everywhere. We can't just—" "I'm not asking for input, Jimmy. Sit down." I looked at the man coming from the front. He was maybe 30 feet away now, still walking at that same steady, weird pace. The woman he'd been leaning over was now sitting up. She should not have been sitting up. I put the bus in reverse. 9:11 a.m. Reversing a 35-foot prison transport bus through stopped traffic is not something I would recommend under normal circumstances. Backed into 2 cars, neither impact serious, both of which I noted in the recording because habit is habit. The mirror on the right side got clipped by a side view and snapped back. I lost about 6 feet of clearance on that side for the rest of the time I had the bus. The man with the gray face hit the front of the bus around 9:09. He hit it the way you'd expect if someone just walked into a moving vehicle without slowing down. Not a collision exactly, more of a thump, and then a dragging sound as he went under the bumper on the left side and out. I kept going. I didn't look. I heard Carla Weeks make a sound in the back of the bus that wasn't quite a word. Kevin Shoup said something that I won't record because it's not relevant, and he repeated it 8 or 9 times, and I'm not putting that on tape. I got the bus turned around by using a gap between 2 cars that I had no business fitting through, and slightly crumpling the rear left corner of the bus. Then I was going south, back the way I'd come, and the road behind me was cleaner. Some cars, people milling, but nothing like what was ahead. I drove. 9:14 a.m. I got far enough from the original stop point that the shoulder opened up and I pulled off completely and sat there. "Okay," I said. No one said anything. "Okay." I set the parking brake and turned to face them. Pete and Jimmy up front, 3 inmates I could see from the driver's seat. Roach in row 1, Shoop in row 2, Carla behind him. The other 3 were further back, but I could see their shapes through the mesh. I'm going to tell you what I think is happening, and I'm going to tell you what I think we should do. You hit that man, Jimmy said. Yes. You drove over him. Yes. He was not going to stop on his own, Jimmy, and if he'd gotten against the door, we'd be having a different problem. So yes, I did that, and I'd do it again. I looked at Pete. Pete, are you with me? Pete had been a cop before corrections. He had that thing some cops get, where they can shut a part of themselves off and just get operational. He was doing that now. I could see it click into place behind his eyes. What's the plan? I need to know what's south of here. The detour roads, the farm roads. I know Route 9 is compromised, at least back to the Cartwell County line. I need to know if there's a route that gets us somewhere defensible. Defensible, Aldous said from the back. His voice was deep and slow, and he used it carefully. What are we defending from? I don't know exactly what it is yet, I said. But you all saw what I saw. So, defensible. Silence. Then Tyler Roach said, there's a county road about 3 miles back. Road 14. Goes east, connects to the 77, which is a small road, but it's paved, and it takes you up into the hill country. I grew up around here. I know this area. How do you know 14 is clear? Pete asked. I don't, but it's not on the highway. 9:22 a.m. I should explain the restraint situation before I go further, because it becomes relevant, and I don't want it to seem like I made this decision casually. The inmates in my custody were restrained. Ankle shackles, wrist cuffs attached to a center chain running to a bolt under each seat. Standard transport configuration. In the event of an emergency, vehicle accident, fire, I had a key on my ring that could open the individual cuffs. Pete had a secondary key for the ankle shackles. Jimmy had a third key for the seat bolts, which allowed partial mobility. The reason you don't just give one person all 3 keys is compartmentalization. In the event that one officer is overpowered, the inmates can't get fully free with just the one key. It's a system that makes sense in normal circumstances. In the circumstances I was now in, where I might need 6 additional adults to help me do things, the system was a problem. I sat there with the engine running and looked at the situation. 6 inmates. 3 of them I considered potentially useful in a crisis. Roach because he had local knowledge. Aldous because he was strong and seemed calm. Carla because she was the most situationally aware person on the bus, and she knew it. 2 I was less sure about. Farley, who was quiet in a way that was harder to read than I'd like, and Tillett, who I hadn't talked to much. 1 was a liability. Shoop, who was still muttering to himself in row 2, and who I could already tell was going to be the person who made bad decisions under pressure. Pete, I said quietly, we need to talk about the restraints. He looked at me. Not all of them, I said, but we're going to have situations where I need people to be able to move. Protocol says. I know what protocol says. He was quiet for a moment. You're the ranking officer on this vehicle. I know that too. We looked at each other for a few seconds. Then he nodded, once, very small. I turned to the back. I'm going to tell you how this is going to work. I'm going to release the wrist restraints on 3 of you. Ankle shackles stay. The seat bolts stay. You will have about 18 inches of additional movement. What you will not have is any freedom that matters. And I want to be completely clear that the rules of this transport are still in effect as far as I'm concerned. And if anyone does anything that puts this vehicle or these officers at risk, I will deal with it. Is that clear? Nobody said anything for a second. Then Brett Aldous said, yeah, okay. Roach said, which 3? Roach, Aldous, Weeks. Shoop said, what about me? Not yet, Shoupé. Why not? I'm not a violent. Because I need to trust the people whose hands I'm freeing. And trust is built over time. And we haven't had time yet. That shut him up. I got up and went down the aisle and unlocked 3 sets of wrists. They all sat there with their hands free, flexing their fingers. I stood in the aisle and looked at them. Can you tell us what's happening? Carla asked. Her voice was very level. She had gray in her hair and reading glasses on a cord around her neck, and she looked like someone's grandmother, except for the circumstances that had gotten her here. Actually, tell us. We're seeing things through these windows, and we're cuffed to seats, and we don't know anything. I know roughly as much as you do, I said. There's something wrong with people, some kind of infection. It's spreading. I don't know how fast. I don't know how far. I'm trying to get us somewhere safe. Is there somewhere safe? I'm going to find one. She looked at me for a moment, then nodded, like she'd decided something. 9:38 a.m. County Road 14 was clear, or clear enough. 2 cars parked half on the shoulder, both abandoned, both empty when I slowed to look. I took the turn and headed east, and the road surface immediately got worse. It was a county road, in a county that hadn't prioritized road maintenance in a decade, and the bus bounced and groaned over potholes that would have been bad in a car, and were worse in a vehicle this size. The ankle shackles rattled. The loose equipment in the storage compartment under the seats shifted and banged. Roach was watching out the window. Stay on 14 until you see a water tower. It's red, or it was red, might be kind of faded by now. Right turn just past it. That puts you on an access road for some old county storage buildings. They're probably empty, but they're set back from the road and there's a chain link fence. You know a lot about county storage buildings, Pete said. Roach turned from the window. I used to do landscaping for the county. Summer work. I know every back road and parking lot in this part of the state. Convenient, Pete said. Is it? Roach said. Seems like convenient would have been not being on this bus when this happened. Pete didn't have anything to say to that. The water tower appeared at 9:51. It was the dark red of something that had been red 30 years ago, more brown than anything now, with Belden stenciled on the side in letters I could barely read. I took the right turn. The access road was unpaved. 2 packed dirt tire tracks with weeds growing between them, and it went back about 300 yards to a cluster of 3 prefab metal buildings behind a chain-link fence with a sliding gate. The gate was padlocked with a standard case-hardened lock, medium grade. I stepped off the bus with a bolt cutter from the emergency kit in the side compartment, cut the lock in one try, pulled the gate open. Everything inside the fence was quiet. The 3 buildings were closed. There was a portable toilet against the far fence that was clearly not current. The door was warped open, and whatever was inside had been composting since at least last year. There was a stack of concrete blocks in one corner, and a rusted bush hog attachment sitting on blocks in another. The grass inside the fence was knee-high. It's not much, Jimmy said from behind me. It's off the road and it's fenced, I said. That's 2 things we didn't have before. I pulled the bus inside, got out, closed and wired the gate shut with a length of electrical wire I found coiled in the first building. The buildings were unlocked, just sliding latches. Inside, a generator on a pallet, no fuel. Some road maintenance equipment. Paint and cans, mostly dried. A shelf of paper records that had gotten wet at some point and fused into a solid block. Extension cords. An old first aid kit. Nothing useful except the generator frame, which I noted, and the extension cords. We sat there in the early afternoon heat and figured out what we had. What we had: bus, 3/4 tank of diesel, road flares, 8, fire extinguisher, full, first aid kit, medium, 2 bolt cutters, 1 pry bar, jumper cables. Officers, 2 sidearms, Pete's and Jimmy's, standard issue 9mm. Pete had a full spare magazine and his duty mag. Jimmy had only his duty mag. 1 shotgun in the front lockbox, 6 shells loaded, and a half box of 8 more in the lockbox. My baton, Pete's baton, Jimmy's baton. My multi-tool. Pete had a folding knife. Jimmy had nothing useful. Inmates, nothing, except what they had when they were transported. Clothing. Tyler Roach had a photograph in his shirt pocket of a teenage girl, who I assumed was a daughter. Shoop had reading glasses. Aaron Tillett had a rosary he'd wrapped around his wrist. Carla Weeks had a small notebook and a pen. Food and water. In the storage locker at the back of the bus, there were 8 bottles of water we were supposed to distribute during the trip, a box of protein bars, 12, and a bag of small bag chips that someone had put there and forgotten about. A plastic water jug, gallon, empty, that I could fill somewhere. That was it. That was what 9 people had to work with. I stood next to the bus and wrote this down on the back of the transport manifest because I needed to see it written out. Then I looked at what I'd written for a while. Then I went back inside to figure out what to do next. 2:14 p.m. We stayed at the county site for the first night. It wasn't a plan exactly, more the absence of a plan combined with the practical reality that I didn't know enough to move yet. What I did during those first afternoon hours, I got the CB radio working on the bus, which gave me some range. I listened to it in short intervals, 5 minutes on, 10 minutes off, not wanting to drain the battery. What I heard was fragmented and bad. A trucker somewhere on I-70 talking about road blockades. A man with a southern accent saying the same address over and over, like he was trying to reach someone specific. Emergency broadcast repeating the shelter-in-place advisory, which had now expanded to include 6 counties, and was being very specific about not approaching individuals displaying unusual behavior, and adding a new instruction: do not allow anyone with bite wounds into your shelter. That was new. I turned the radio off and sat with that for a minute. Bite wounds. Okay. So that's what we were dealing with. I hadn't been entirely sure until then. Sometimes you look at something and your brain wants to give it a less terrible explanation. The gray-faced man with the bleeding eye could have been a medical emergency. The woman on the ground could have been hurt in the traffic chaos. The ones coming through the fence could have been confused, disoriented, some kind of mass hysteria event. But you don't tell people to watch for bite wounds unless the biting is the mechanism. I've read enough history to know that humans have a long and mostly fictional relationship with this particular idea, but the fictional version doesn't matter right now. What matters is the functional reality. People are being attacked. Attacked people are becoming attackers. Do not let anyone with a bite wound into your shelter. Got it. I went back to the bus and told Pete and Jimmy what I'd heard, quietly, so the inmates couldn't follow the whole conversation. I'm not sure why I was still doing that, separating the information, except that old habits run deep, and I hadn't yet figured out what the new rules were. Pete's face did something complicated. He has a daughter in college. I remembered that. He'd mentioned it once, offhandedly, when I'd seen a photo on his phone. What about our families? Jimmy asked. Cell coverage has been spotty, I said. But try. Keep trying. Where are we going? And here's where I made a decision that was less about evidence and more about needing somewhere to go, which is maybe not the best foundation for a decision, but I've made worse ones. Harwell, I said. We keep going to Harwell. The prison, Pete said. Think about it. Walls, cells, a generator setup that's designed to run independent of the grid, medical unit, commissary, security systems. It's the most defensible building within range that we have any access to. I had the transport paperwork in my shirt pocket. We have authorization codes, staff IDs. If there's anyone still there, we have credentials. And if there's nobody still there, then we have a big empty prison to ourselves. Pete thought about this. It's still 60 miles north. Route 9 is compromised, but Roach says he knows alternate roads. We both looked at Roach, who was sitting in his seat, watching us through the mesh divider the way people in cages watch things. Steady, patient, not much to lose. Roach, I said, you said you know the back roads north. Yeah? How far can you get me on county roads and farm routes? Depends on what's blocked. He thought about it. I can get you to Belden. From Belden there's a 2-lane state road, Route 22, that goes almost directly north. It's not a main artery, mostly used for county traffic. If 22 is clear, you can be at the Harwell facility in maybe 3 hours. Belden is 12 miles, roughly. I looked at the sun through the bus windshield. Afternoon, past the worst of the heat, but another 2 hours before it got any cooler. We'll go in the morning, I said. First light. The night at the county site was exactly as bad as you'd expect, with 9 people and 1 toilet, which was the one inside the bus, a small chemical unit in a closet behind the driver's seat that was designed for emergencies and was now being treated as a regular bathroom. I slept in the driver's seat for about 4 hours. Not really slept. That half state where your body stops moving but your brain is still running on a loop. I kept hearing sounds from outside the fence that I couldn't identify, and every time my brain started processing something, it would get stuck on the list of things I didn't know. How fast does it spread? What happens to the people who turn? Do they stay where they are, or do they range? How far south had the initial outbreak started? Where were the military? Pete took the first watch, 2 hours, then woke me, and I did 2 hours. Then he took another. Jimmy had offered, but Pete had said no, very quietly, and I hadn't argued, because Jimmy's hands had been shaking earlier, and I didn't want him standing alone in the dark with a firearm and a case of the nerves. In the morning I checked. Everyone accounted for. Everyone alive. Nobody had done anything during the night to change the dynamic. Carla Weeks had been awake too, I think. When the light came up, she was sitting very straight with her arms crossed and her eyes clear in a way that said she hadn't slept. She met my eyes and didn't say anything, and I didn't say anything, and that was its own kind of communication. Day 2. Morning. I want to stop using times because I don't have a watch, and I can't see the clock from here without leaning forward. And anyway, the exact time stopped mattering somewhere around day 3, so I'm going to start doing this differently. Day markers when I know them, otherwise just in sequence. We left the county site at first light, which in August is early, 5-something. The gate was already open. I'd unwired it while Pete did a perimeter check. The road was empty. The silence was the kind you don't normally hear on a road this close to civilization. No trucks, no distant highway hum, no planes overhead. August mornings usually have at least the sound of a combine somewhere in these fields. Nothing. Roach talked me through the roads from his seat behind the mesh. Left on 14, then right on Sycamore Creek Road, then a straight shot east until you hit the town of Briarly, which was too small to call a town but had a gas station. We need fuel, I said. I know. The Briarly station is a small operation, family-owned. They have a big tank, because they service farm equipment. If anyone's there, they'll probably have fuel. And if anyone isn't, then we figure it out. The Briarly gas station appeared at about, I want to say 7 in the morning. One pump island, diesel on one side, regular on the other. Convenience store attached to it, one of those narrow wood frame buildings with a screen door and a hand-painted sign. The lights inside were off. The parking lot was empty. I pulled in. Stay in the bus, I told Pete and Jimmy. If anything moves wrong, honk twice. I took my baton, got out, did a slow walk around the perimeter. Nothing. The screen door to the store was latched from the inside, but the main door had a deadbolt that was old enough to surrender to about 20 seconds of work with my pry bar. I went inside. The store was small and dark, that smell of a space that's been closed up in summer heat, warm and slightly sweet and slightly off. Chips, jerky, candy, canned goods on 3 shelves. A cooler on the back wall. No power. Already warming up, but the drinks inside would still be okay for now. I started loading things into the mesh bag I'd pulled from the cleaning supplies in the bus. I got 4 gallons of water from a display by the door, 12 cans of soup, 8 cans of beans, 6 bags of jerky, 2 boxes of crackers, a large bag of coffee, powdered creamer, 3 packs of batteries, 2 lighters, a box of waterproof matches, 2 flashlights that were hanging on a display rack, a first aid kit in a wall mount behind the counter, 5 packs of over-the-counter pain reliever, a roll of duct tape, and one thing I hadn't expected. Hanging on the wall behind the register, a hunting knife in a leather sheath, the kind a store like this keeps for sale, and I took it and noted it on the transport manifest, because habit is habit. Fuel was trickier. The pump was off because the power was off, but there was a hand pump around the back, the kind that goes into a portable fuel tank, and the portable tank, big green 25-gallon plastic unit, was sitting against the back wall with about half a tank of diesel in it. I hand-pumped fuel into the bus for 20 minutes and got maybe 15 gallons in, which wasn't full but was better, and I was starting to sweat through my shirt by the time I was done. On my way back inside for one more sweep of the store, I saw something on the counter I'd missed the first time. A piece of notebook paper, folded twice, with a single word written on the outside. Read. I unfolded it. The handwriting was uneven, like it had been written quickly, or by someone whose hand wasn't steady. It said, "Took my family north. If you're smart, you go north too. They come from the south and east. Don't stop in Belden. Don't go to the hospital. The people there are not right." And underneath that, in different ink, like it had been added later, I went back for my brother. He was not my brother anymore. I stood there in the dark of that little store for about 30 seconds, reading it twice, and then I folded it back up and put it in my shirt pocket next to the transport manifest. I went back to the bus. "What did you find?" Pete asked. "Food, fuel, some supplies." I started the engine, and a note. What did it say? "Don't stop in Belden, and don't go to the hospital." Silence. "That's not encouraging," Jimmy said. "No," I agreed. We drove around Belden. Roach's alternate route added about 8 miles, and we hit the first real obstacle about 4 of those miles in. A farmhouse set back from the road, and in the road in front of the driveway, someone had parked 2 pickup trucks side by side, blocking the road completely, and strung a chain-link section across the gap with a handwritten sign on it. "Road closed. Turn around. No exceptions." 2 people were sitting in chairs in the driveway, watching us. One had a hunting rifle across his lap. The other was holding something I couldn't identify from this distance. I stopped the bus. "Window down?" Pete asked. "Halfway." I rolled it down halfway and called out, "We're just passing through. We're government transport. We need to get north." The man with the rifle stood up. He was maybe 60, heavy-set, wearing overalls and a cap. He walked to the chain link. "Can't go through here." "Is there another way around?" "You can go back the way you came. That road's got problems." "Every road's got problems, son. This one's got us." He said it without threat, more like a statement of geography. "Where you heading?" "Harwell Correctional." He squinted. He could see the bus, obviously. Could see the markings on the side. "You got prisoners on there?" 6. Restrained and calm. "What happened on the highway?" "We've been hearing things. There was an incident, mass incident. I'm not sure how far it spread." I paused. "There's a note going around saying people are coming from the south and east." He looked at the other person in the chair. A woman, older, probably his wife. Some kind of silent conversation. Then he looked back at me. "There's a farm road about a half-mile back, east side. Looks like a driveway, but it goes through about 2 miles of fields and comes out on a gravel road past Sagers Creek. From there you can get to Route 22 without going through town. We appreciate that. You have enough fuel?" "For now." He looked at the bus for a long moment. "God help you," he said, not unkindly, just like a fact. He stepped back. I rolled up the window. "God help us," Jimmy said under his breath. "Find me a pen," I said. He handed me one from his shirt pocket. I pulled out the note from the store, and on the back of it I wrote, "Farm Road half-mile east, gravel road past Sagers Creek, Route 22, Harwell." I don't know why I wrote it down. Nobody was going to find that note useful, but I wrote it down anyway. Day 2, afternoon. Route 22 was, in the early part at least, exactly what Roach had said. Small, paved, not a main artery. We passed 2 abandoned cars in the first 3 miles, both empty, one of them with the engine still running when we went by. And I thought about stopping for fuel, but the tank was still decent, and I didn't want to spend time out of the vehicle. At mile 7 on Route 22, we found the thing that changed how I understood what was happening. The road went over a small overpass, a creek overpass, just a concrete span over Sagers Creek, maybe 40 feet long. On the other side of the overpass, on the left shoulder, there was a semi-truck pulled half off the road, and behind the semi-truck was an RV, and behind the RV were 4 more cars, and they were all stopped, and all of them had people inside or around them. And for a second I thought, another traffic jam, another situation where I'm going to have to navigate around blocked vehicles. But as I got closer, I could see that the people around the cars weren't standing and looking and shrugging. They were sitting, or lying in the grass, and they weren't moving. I stopped about 100 feet back. "What is that?" Jimmy said. Stay here. I looked at Pete. You drive if you need to. Don't wait more than 5 minutes. I took the shotgun from the lockbox. First time I'd pulled it out, and I got off the bus, and I walked toward the vehicles. All dead. Not infected, not the gray-faced, wrong-moving kind. Just dead. 5 people around and in those vehicles, all of them with gunshot wounds. One of them still in the driver's seat of the RV. One hand on the steering wheel, the other in his lap. A woman on the grass next to the second car. 3 more at various points between the vehicles. They had supplies. A lot of supplies. The RV back was stacked with boxes. Food, water jugs, camping equipment, fuel cans. All of it still there. Nobody had taken it. Which meant whoever had done this hadn't been after supplies. I stood in the road next to those dead people for about a minute, working through what that meant. Then I went back to the bus. There are dead people, I said. Pete looked at me. Infected? No. Shot. Silence. Someone shot them? Jimmy said. Yes. Why? I didn't answer that directly. There are supplies in the RV. Food, water, fuel. I'm going to take them. That's... Jimmy started. What? He stopped. I'm taking them, I said again. Because those people are past needing them, and we're not. Nobody argued. I backed the bus up to the RV and spent 20 minutes loading. Fuel cans, 2 5-gallon diesel cans, which went in the bus's external storage. Food. I couldn't take everything. Took the most calorie-dense and portable items. Water, 3-gallon jugs. First aid supplies. A full trauma kit. Better than anything we had. And on the passenger seat of the RV, I found a road atlas of the state, dog-eared and annotated in pencil, circles around towns, X marks through others, a route marked in red pen going north. I took the atlas. I covered the people in the grass as best I could, with a tarp from the RV. I don't know why. Nobody was going to come looking for them, but I covered them. Then I got back on the bus and kept going north. Somewhere around mid-afternoon of day 2, Roach said, "Can I see the atlas?" I passed it through the slot in the mesh. He studied it for a while. Then he said, "Whoever made these marks knew where they were going. Look, the X marks are on towns that probably have a lot of population. The circles are on small towns, crossroads, rural areas. They were routing around the cities." Smart. Yeah. He paused. The route in red, it goes to Harwell. I looked in the mirror. Not directly, he said, but it ends near there. There's a circle on a road junction about 4 miles east of the facility. Maybe they were going there too. Maybe. He was quiet for a minute. Or maybe they knew something about the facility, and they were routing around it instead of toward it. I didn't have anything to say to that. I filed it somewhere and kept driving. We hit a problem at the junction of routes 22 and 51. There were infected there. Not a few. A cluster of maybe 30, 40. Spread across the intersection and the grass around it, and the parking lot of what had been a small diner on the corner. They weren't attacking anything. There was nothing to attack. They were just there, milling in that directionless way, occasionally bumping into each other and separating, like slow particles in a confined space. I stopped the bus about 200 yards back and sat there with the engine idling. "What are they doing?" Carla said from her seat. "Nothing," I said. "Just standing." "They're loud," she said. I rolled my window down a crack. She was right. There was a sound coming from the group. A kind of low, continuous noise that wasn't quite anything. Not moaning, not growling, something more formless than that. Like a room full of people all humming different notes at once. "Can we go around?" Pete asked. "Not without going through that diner's parking lot and the field beyond it, and I don't know what the field's like underneath." We sat there. "If we drive through them," Brett Aldis said. "Depends on the numbers. I might have driven through 3 or 4 without stopping. 40 is different. They'll be on every surface of the bus. They'll slow us down, if they can get to a window or a door." "The windows don't open," Roach said. "The doors do." Silence. "And they'll know where we are," Aaron Tillett said. It was the first time he'd spoken all day. and his voice was very quiet and steady. "If we drive through them, they'll follow." Everybody looked at him. "They react to sound," he said. "I've been watching. When there's no sound, they just mill around. When something makes noise, they turn toward it. If we go through 40 of them, every one of them is going to be oriented on this bus and walking after it, and we don't know what's ahead on the road, and having 40 of them behind us when we hit the next obstacle is worse than 40 of them in front of us." He wasn't wrong. It was a better analysis than I'd done. I looked at him in the mirror. "How do you figure?" "I grew up hunting," he said. "You learn to watch how animals move. These things move like animals, not smart animals." He paused. "I also had a lot of time this morning to look out the window while you were all talking." "Okay," I said. "So we don't go through them. Other option is, we wait." "For what?" "For them to disperse. Move on. Something else to attract their attention." "That could take hours," Pete said. "Could. Could also be dark by then." "Could be." Nobody liked any of the options. The day had gotten to that late afternoon quality, the light going golden and long, and I sat with the engine idling and watched the cluster at the intersection and thought. Then Doug Farley, who had said almost nothing the entire day, said from the back of the bus, "There's another way." I hadn't heard him say more than a dozen words since we left the depot. "I'm listening," I said. "There's a farm road parallel to 22 that runs about half a mile west of here. It's not on that atlas, probably not on any atlas. But I know it, because I used to run product through this area. Dirt roads. They're not maintained, but they cut over to 51 about a mile north of here. We'd come out above that intersection." I turned to look at him through the mesh. He was sitting very still, the way he'd sat all day, with his hands on his knees and his face completely neutral. He was the youngest of the 6, 29, and there was something about him that read older than that, a certain economy of movement, a habit of silence. "How sure are you?" I asked. "Pretty sure. This was my territory for 4 years. If you're wrong, we end up in a field." "Yeah." I thought about it for maybe 10 seconds. "Where's the turn?" "Back about a quarter mile. There's a gap in the tree line on the right. Not a real entrance, just a gap. You can take the bus through it. The ground should hold." It held. Barely. The front wheels dropped into a rut right at the entrance, and the whole bus lurched, and I heard at least 2 people swear, and something in the back storage rattled loose and hit the floor. But we got through, and the field beyond was flat, summer-dry corn stubble, firm enough under the tires. Farley talked me through it from the back. Left here, a little right to avoid the ditch, straight through the tree line on the far side. The road starts after that. His directions were specific and confident, and every single one of them was correct. We came out on Route 51, a mile above the intersection, exactly as he'd said. The road ahead was clear. I drove for a while without saying anything. Then I said, "Farley." "Yeah, thank you." He didn't say anything. I unlocked his wrists. He didn't comment on that either. He just sat there with his hands free, looking out the window. Day 2. Night. 32 miles north of the intersection, we found a place to stop for the night. It was a grain elevator complex, 3 cylindrical concrete silos next to a corrugated metal building, the whole thing surrounded by a concrete apron and connected to the road by a concrete drive. The silos were locked, but the outer fence was just rope and a sign, "Private Property, Jensen Agri." I drove through the rope, pulled the bus behind the silos, killed the engine. We ate from the supplies I'd taken at the RV. Canned soup, cold, straight from the can, because we had no way to heat it. Crackers, a protein bar each for dessert. Everyone got 1 bottle of water. I rationed it formally, announced it as a ration, made it clear this was the rule. 1 bottle per person per day minimum, more if we could source it. The canned soup provided some liquid too. We'd need to find more water within 2 days, or things would get uncomfortable. The meal was mostly silent. Kevin Shoup ate his soup without making eye contact with anyone. He'd been quiet since that first chaotic hour, the initial panic having apparently depleted whatever reserves he usually ran on. He looked like a man who had a very specific life that had very specific rules, and all the rules had just been canceled, and he didn't know what to do with that. I understood it, actually, more than I wanted to admit. Aaron Tillett ate carefully, like someone paying attention to what he was doing. Pete and Jimmy ate standing, close together, talking quietly. I caught some of it. Pete was saying that Jimmy needed to call his mother, and Jimmy was saying he'd been trying, and Pete said to keep trying, that coverage would come back. I ate my soup and looked at the atlas. The circled junction 4 miles east of Harwell. I looked at it, turned it over in my head. Roach's theory that the map's maker had been routing around the facility rather than toward it. But why would you route around a fortified prison? You'd route around it if it was compromised, if it was already gone, if whatever was supposed to be safe about it was no longer true. I set the atlas down and didn't share this thought with anyone, because we were already in the bus, and it was already dark, and there was nowhere else to go tonight. Better to see for ourselves in the morning. Brett Aldis, from the back of the bus, said, "Coulter, yeah. You think anyone's coming to help us? Government, military, whatever? I think they're probably dealing with a lot of situations," I said. "That's a no. That's a not yet." He was quiet for a moment. "How far are we from the facility? 40, maybe 50 miles? With the roads we're taking, probably 2.5 hours of driving. Can we trust the roads?" "We'll find out tomorrow," he grunted. Not satisfied, but not unsatisfied either. The sound of someone who accepts the answer he gets because he knows he's not going to get a better one. I slept in the driver's seat again. 3 hours this time, a little deeper. When I woke up at what felt like 3 in the morning, I could hear something on the far side of the silos. A dull, repetitive sound, like something bumping against concrete at irregular intervals. I sat and listened to it for a long time. It didn't change, just that slow, irregular bump, like something that had bumped into the silo and couldn't figure out why it couldn't go further, so it just kept bumping. I didn't tell anyone about it. It went away by dawn. Day 3. The road north was better than I'd expected, until it wasn't. We made good time in the first hour. Route 51 was mostly empty. A few abandoned vehicles at the sides, but nothing blocking the lanes, and the countryside looked almost normal. Fields, fences, occasional farmhouses, the distant shapes of grain bins and water towers. If you didn't know, you might not know. It looked like a quiet Tuesday morning in agricultural country. The sign of what we were actually driving through came in small details. A car in a ditch, with both doors open, and nobody inside or around it. A farmhouse with every window broken, and something dark on the porch steps. A roadkill deer on the shoulder that had been partially eaten, but not by anything that ate deer in the normal way. The pattern of consumption was wrong, concentrated around the face and neck. I noticed it, and then I thought about what that implied about the behavior of the infected, and I didn't pursue that thought to its logical end. Shoopy noticed the deer too. He said, "Oh God." I said nothing, and kept driving. At mile marker, I'm not sure, somewhere around mile 12 on Route 51, we came across the truck. It was a commercial box truck, white, unmarked, pulled diagonally across both northbound lanes, the way you'd park it if you wanted to block traffic and not have it moved easily. It was clearly deliberate, and on the back roll-up door, in spray paint in capital letters, 2 lines, "Don't trust the uniforms. They take your weapons and leave you." I stopped the bus. Everyone read it. Pete said, "That's not about us." "No," I agreed, "but it's about someone. Military maybe, or whoever's doing checkpoints." I looked at the message for a while. The paint was not fresh. It had drips that had dried, and the surface looked rained on or dew-covered, which in August meant it had been there at least a couple of days. "Can we get around the truck?" Aaron asked. "The shoulder was wide here." I went wide right, 2 wheels on the grass, and we cleared it. "We should remember that," Carla said. "I know," I said. "I mean, keep it in mind, not just as a note." I looked in the mirror. She was watching me. "I know," I said again. 31 miles from Harwell, we found the child. She was sitting in the back seat of a station wagon parked on the right shoulder, with the hazards blinking, which meant the battery was still running, which meant it hadn't been there very long. She looked about 8 years old. She was sitting very straight, with a purple backpack in her lap and her arms around it, and she was looking out the window as we drove by. I drove by. I drove about 40 more feet. I stopped. Pete said, very carefully, "Ray." "I know," I said. "We can't stop for every. There's nobody else with her. The car's empty. She might be bait." I looked at him. He was being practical, not cruel. I understood the distinction. But a car with hazards running and a small child in it alone is not bait. That's a parent who expected to be right back. "I'll be fast," I said. I took the shotgun again, got out, approached the car slowly. She watched me come. She didn't move, didn't react, just watched. She was wearing a yellow shirt, and she had a streak of something dried on her cheek that I didn't look at too closely. I knocked on the window. She looked at the window. "Is there anyone with you?" I called. She shook her head. "Is there anyone coming back?" She shook her head again. "What's your name?" She looked at me for a long time. Then she said something I couldn't hear through the glass. I held up a finger. "Wait," and I tried the door. It opened. "What's your name?" I asked again. "Lily," she said. "My mom said to wait here." "How long have you been waiting?" She looked at the back of the headrest in front of her, doing some calculation. "I don't know. The night came, and then the day. So at least 15, maybe 20 hours, alone in a car on the side of a state road in August." I looked at her backpack. I looked at her face. She was calm in a way that concerned me. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes from using up all the fear you have and arriving at the other side of it. "Are you hurt anywhere?" She shook her head. I took 2 seconds and thought about this. 9 people in a bus that was already short on supplies. One of them 8 years old. Additional logistical problem I didn't need. But she was 8, and she'd been alone in this car for the night, and her mother was not coming back. I held out my hand. "Come with me." She got out of the car, still holding the backpack, and took my hand with her other one. Her hand was very small. I walked her back to the bus. Pete held the door open without saying anything. I put her in the front seat, the passenger seat, next to Jimmy, which put her up front with the officers and away from the inmates. She sat there with her backpack on her lap and looked at everything with those 2 calm eyes. "Hello," Jimmy said. In that way, young men without kids speak to children, slightly high-pitched and uncertain. She looked at him. "My name's Jimmy." "Okay," she said. I drove. Kevin Shoup found a use for himself in the next 30 miles. He had, it turned out, a daughter around Lily's age, or had, the tense being unclear and not something I asked about. And he sat in his seat across the aisle from her and talked to her in a quiet way that wasn't forced. He told her about a cat he used to have. He told her about what his daughter liked to eat for breakfast. He asked Lily what she liked for breakfast, and she said pancakes with the blueberries inside, not on top, with a specificity that told me her life had been normal enough to have preferences about pancake preparation until very recently. I noted that Shoup was useful for this, and recalibrated him in my assessment accordingly. We were 40 minutes from Harwell when the nature of what we were driving toward became clear. We could smell it before we saw it. Not any one smell I can name cleanly. A combination. Something burned, something organic and wrong, and over the top of it, a smell like the inside of a very dirty building that's been closed up too long. The road ahead curved north, and there was a gradual rise, and when we crested it, we could see Harwell facility from about a mile out. The walls were intact. The watchtowers were standing. The perimeter fencing, which was doubled chain link with razor wire, looked structurally complete from this distance. But there were no lights, and there were shapes at the outer fence, moving against it, dozens of them, and even from a mile away I could see the characteristic movement, the directionless milling, the occasional concentrated press against the wire. Inside the perimeter, at one section of the yard, there was a burned-out area. Something had been on fire, probably a vehicle, probably more than one. The char marks were visible even from here. I stopped the bus at the top of the rise and everyone was quiet. The gate, Pete said, very carefully. The main vehicle gate, the heavy double gate system on the south side of the facility, was open. Both sections of it, wide open. Something had gotten in, or something had gotten out, or both. I sat there with the bus idling and looked at what was left of the plan. Harwell is gone, I said. Nobody argued. Lily, in the front seat, was looking out the windshield. Is that where we were going? She asked. Yes. It doesn't look good. No, I said, it doesn't. What do we do now? I started turning the bus around. We figure that out. Day 3. Afternoon. I took us east on a county road until the facility was out of sight and the smell had faded to something bearable, and then I pulled into the parking lot of what had been a rural church. White clapboard building, small, a gravel lot, a row of cars that had been there long enough that the grass had started growing up around the tires, and I stopped the engine. We sat there. After a while, Tyler Roach said, "The Atlas, the circle on the junction east of here. What if that's not a routing decision? What if it's a marker?" "What kind of marker?" "Like a meeting point, a planned rendezvous." I got the Atlas out, looked at the circle junction. It was a T intersection of 2 county roads, about 4 miles northeast of our current position. In the margin next to the circle, there was a number written in pencil, 0900, that I'd noticed before, but hadn't assigned meaning to. 9 in the morning. The people in the RV, Pete said slowly, the ones who were shot, they had this Atlas. They were going to that junction at 9 in the morning. But they didn't make it, I said. Someone might still be waiting. This was the kind of hope that's also a warning. You follow it because you have to, and you don't trust it because you know better. I looked at the clock built into the dash. It was just past 2 in the afternoon. We go there, I said. Carefully, we look first. If something looks wrong, we leave. And if someone's actually there? Carla asked. Then we figure out if they're the kind of people we want to be near. The junction was empty. We sat there for 30 minutes, watching. Nothing moved. The road was empty in all 4 directions. A mailbox at the corner of a farm driveway. A mile marker sign. Nothing else. I was about to leave when Aaron Tillett said, "Wait, look at the mailbox." I looked. Hanging from the mailbox door, on a piece of fishing line, was a small orange flag, the kind hunters use to mark fence lines, and below it, tied with more line, a small plastic bag, the sandwich bag kind, with a folded piece of paper inside. I got out and retrieved it. Inside the bag, a handwritten note on a torn piece of lined paper. The handwriting was different from the note at the gas station, smaller, more controlled. It said, "If you got here by 9, we've already moved. Following 13C to the quarry site. Camp Wyeth, ask for Denton." I stood on the side of the road with this information for a moment. I'd heard of Camp Wyeth. It was a state park youth camp about 20 miles northwest of here, on a reservoir. Cabins, a dining hall, dock facilities. I'd driven past the access road once, years ago. I got back in the bus. "Well?" Pete said. I handed him the note. He read it, passed it to Jimmy. Jimmy looked at it, and then looked at me. "We going?" "We're going," I said. Day 3. Evening. Camp Wyeth's access road was gated with a cable barrier and 2 people standing at it with hunting rifles. They were not in any kind of uniform. One was a man about 40, with a beard that suggested he hadn't shaved since before the outbreak, and the other was a teenager, maybe 16, with a .22 rifle and a very straight back, the posture of someone who'd been told to look confident. We got the note at the 13C junction, looking for Denton. They talked quietly to each other. Then the bearded man walked up to my window. He looked at the bus. He looked at the markings. He looked at me, then at Pete and Jimmy in their corrections uniforms, then at the shapes in the back. "Who all's on there?" 3 officers, 6 inmates, restrained. 1 child, age 8, found alone on Route 51. "Inmates," he said. "Yes. Armed robbery, assault, fraud, trafficking, manslaughter, attempted murder. I listed them, all restrained and calm. None of them are infected. You sure? I'm sure. He looked at the bus for a long time. I need to get Denton. He was gone for 5 minutes. The teenager with the 22 stood at the cable barrier and looked at the bus with a mix of fascination and wariness that was very specific to being 16 in a strange situation. Denton turned out to be a woman in her mid-50s, with short gray hair and the kind of face that has lived outdoors a lot. She was wearing a canvas work shirt and carrying a radio. She walked up to the bus without any of the caution the bearded man had shown, more like someone doing an assessment. Your corrections? She said. Transport? Yes. Ray Coulter, this is Pete Harlan and Jimmy Doss. And the inmates are not going anywhere they're not supposed to. She looked through the windshield at Lily in the front seat. Lily looked back. Hi, Lily said. Something in Denton's face shifted. Hi back, she said. Then to me, how'd you find the note? RV on Route 51 near Saggers Creek. Had the atlas. I paused because I didn't have a clean way to say this. We found the people from the RV. They didn't make it. We took their supplies. She was quiet for a moment. The Jenkins family. Were those your people? Friends of friends. They were trying to get to us. She straightened. All right. You can bring the bus in. We'll talk about logistics. I need to be clear about the inmates, I said. I'm not releasing their ankle restraints. They have freedom of movement inside the bus, but they are in my custody. That's your business. I just want there to be no misunderstanding. There isn't. She turned and gestured at the bearded man, who lowered the cable barrier. I drove in. Camp Wyeth. I'm going to give the lay of the land here, because it's relevant to what happened next, and also to understanding the decisions I made. Camp Wyeth occupied about 40 acres of a reservoir front property. The main road went in from the gate about a quarter mile to a main building, the dining hall and administration combined, a large 2-story wooden structure, and from there branches went to 6 cabin clusters. Each cluster had 4 or 5 cabins, smaller buildings, wood-framed, simple. The reservoir was on the west side, a dock with 2 canoes, and a flat-bottomed boat. The whole property was surrounded by a combination of the natural reservoir shore on the west, forested hillsides on the north and south, and on the east, the accessible side, a wooden perimeter fence that wouldn't stop much, supplemented by the group's own additions. Razor wire along the top in some sections, wooden stakes along the base, a couple of improvised watch positions. There were 23 people here. I counted at the first meal. Adults, teenagers, 4 children besides Lily. Denton and her husband, Gareth, who was quieter, and who I later found out had been a paramedic. A man named Philip, who had been a high school teacher, and was now in charge of keeping the perimeter records. A couple named Harriet and Roy, who had come up from Belden with their 2 daughters, 14 and 11. Others, ordinary people in an extraordinary situation, which is redundant, and also the whole story. They had food, not comfortable amounts, but enough for several weeks if rationed. They'd cleared the camp's pantry, supplemented it with supplies from 2 runs to a nearby town before things got too bad. They had a generator that ran on propane, and they were being careful with it. 4 hours on, rest off, priority on the refrigerator unit, and some lighting. They had a radio setup that could receive, but whose transmission range was limited. They had no doctor. Gareth the paramedic was the closest thing. They had, I discovered within the first 20 minutes, a significant problem that nobody had wanted to say out loud yet. Day 3, evening, Camp Wyeth. The problem was a man named Coleman. He'd arrived at the camp 4 days before we did. He'd come on foot from the direction of Belden, alone, carrying a large backpack and identifying himself as a former army officer. He'd had a cut on his forearm that he'd said was from barbed wire. The cut was not from barbed wire. Denton had known this, I think, from early on, and had chosen to believe the better explanation because Coleman was competent and calm and had immediately made himself useful, organizing the watch rotations, running the perimeter checks, helping with fortifications. He was Objectively, the most experienced person in the camp. He'd done actual field work, actual security operations. In a group of 23 frightened civilians, that was worth a lot. But Gareth had looked at the wound on day 2, and Gareth had come to Denton that night. And then Coleman had overheard something, or guessed something, and had taken the camp's entire supply of rifle ammunition, 3 boxes of 308, 2 boxes of 3006, 1 box of 22 long rifle, and locked himself in cabin 4, which was at the end of the furthest branch road, and announced through the door that he would negotiate, but he would not be removed. This was the situation when I arrived. It was also, I understood immediately, why Denton had let a bus full of corrections officers and inmates into her camp without much argument. I talked to Gareth first, to get the medical assessment. "How long?" I asked. He rubbed his face. He had that specific exhaustion of someone who has been managing a situation they don't know how to fix. The wound was consistent with a bite. He covered it well, but I've seen enough bite wounds. The progression, he's had a low-grade fever for 2 days, some light sensitivity, confusion episodes, brief ones. He's compensating well. He's a trained soldier. He can push through symptoms. But it's there. Timeline. I don't know how fast this thing moves. I've seen people turn. We had one here, before you came. A man who'd come in with a scratch he'd said was from a broken car window. He was fine for a day and a half. Then he wasn't. A day and a half. I looked at the sky. Last light. Coleman's been here 4 days. Yes. And he's still functional. Yes. Which suggests either the bite was minor, or he's a very healthy individual, or, Gareth stopped, or there's variation in the progression. Yes. I thought about what that meant for the camp, for us, for the situation in cabin 4. He knows what's happening to him, I said. Yes. He's not delusional about it. He knows. Then why take the ammunition? Gareth looked at the ground, because he wants to be the one to decide when it ends. I didn't say anything to that. And he doesn't want to be removed before he decides, Gareth added. The problem with removing Coleman wasn't just the locked door and the ammunition. A trained soldier who was symptomatic but still functional, barricaded in a solid wooden building, holding a significant fraction of the camp's ammunition, trying to force entry was a problem. And Coleman had been right about one thing. The camp's watch rotation was more organized since he'd arrived. Disrupting it badly might compromise the perimeter. I went and looked at cabin 4 from a distance. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have done, but I did it anyway. I went and got Tyler Roach. Roach and I walked to cabin 4 together. I had his wrist cuffs off and his ankle shackles on, which gave him about a 2-foot stride, and he moved in that shuffling gait that people in ankle shackles have, and he didn't complain about it. At the door of cabin 4, I stopped. "Coleman," I called. "My name is Ray Coulter. I'm the transport officer from the bus that just came in. I'm not part of this camp's group. I have no particular stake in their internal problems. I just want to talk. Nothing for a moment." Then, through the door, "What are you going to say that's worth talking about?" His voice was steady, controlled. He did sound like a soldier. "I'm not going to tell you what to do," I said. "I'm not going to try to force you. I just want to have an honest conversation, because I think you deserve one." Long pause. "The man with you," Coleman said. "Why'd you bring him? He's one of my inmates. I trust him more than most people I've met this week. That's not a political statement. It's just accurate." Another pause. "What are we honest about?" Coleman said. "We're honest about the fact that you know what's happening to you, and I think you've already made a decision, and I think the decision is the right one, and I'm not here to stop you. I'm here to ask if there's anything you want to say before you do." Silence. A very long silence. Then the sound of a bolt sliding. The door opened. Coleman was about 45, thick through the shoulders, with a military haircut that had grown out a bit. His face had the gray paper quality I now recognized. His left arm was wrapped in clean bandaging. He looked at me, then at Roach, and then back at me. "You want me to give you the ammunition?" he said. "I want you to give the camp the ammunition, yes. And in return? No removal. No rush. Your terms." He leaned against the doorframe. He looked tired in a bone-deep way that wasn't just sleep deprivation. "I have a wife. In Columbus. I was trying to get home." I didn't say anything. I got as far as Belden when the roads closed. He looked at his wrapped arm. "I shouldn't have tried to clear that gas station on my own." "No," I said gently. He nodded, like he was agreeing with himself. "The kids in the main building. How many?" "5, counting the one we brought in. Keep them away from the perimeter at night. The infected range more at night than people think. I'll tell Denton." He reached back into the cabin and picked up the boxes of ammunition. He handed them to me. 3 boxes of Rind. 308, 2 of 23006, 1 of 22. Heavy in my arms. "Give me until morning," he said. "You've got it." He looked at Roach. "What are you in for?" "Armed robbery," Roach said. Coleman nodded slowly. "First conviction?" "Second." "Were you guilty?" "First time, no. Second time, yeah." Coleman made a sound that might have been a laugh, very small. "Honest man," he said. He stepped back inside the cabin. He closed the door. Roach and I walked back to the main building in the last of the daylight. In the morning, Coleman was gone. He'd gone out the cabin window sometime in the early hours, taken a folding knife from his pack, and walked into the forest toward the reservoir. I don't know exactly what happened at the reservoir's edge. I didn't go look, and I didn't let anyone else go look. It was his decision and his terms, and that's where I'm leaving it. I told Denton. She listened, nodded twice, didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For talking to him. Nobody here could figure out how." I gave her the ammunition. Day 4. We stayed at Camp Wyeth for 3 days. I want to be clear about what those 3 days were, because they were both the best thing that happened in the early part of this situation and the beginning of something I didn't see coming. Day 4. We did practical work. With the camp's people and my group, we went through every resource we had and made a full accounting. I am a person who believes in full accounting. Here's what we had across all parties, once I was done with the inventory. Food. Approximately 35 person days of full rations. If rationed at 2/3, we were at 50 person days. 23 people in the camp, plus my 9, made 32 people. 50 person days divided by 32 people was less than 2 weeks. Water, secure. The reservoir was right there, and Gareth had figured out a gravity filter system using sand and charcoal that was rudimentary but functional for drinking. Not a crisis. Fuel. Propane for the generator was getting low, 20% capacity. They'd been careful, but they'd started with less than they'd hoped. The bus had diesel, but that was transport fuel, not generation fuel. Medical. Gareth's paramedic supplies, what I'd taken from the RV trauma kit, the camp's own first aid. Functional for basic injuries, not functional for anything serious. Security. The perimeter was not bad for what it was, but it was wooden fence with additions. It would not stop a significant number of infected if they arrived in force. Philip, the school teacher, had been keeping a log of infected sightings outside the perimeter. 1 on day 1, 2 on day 2, 3 on day 3, and on day 4, which was yesterday, 7. The number was going up. "They're finding us," Philip said. He had a precise manner of speaking that I appreciated. He laid it out without drama. The fence line on the east side has had contact marks from 3 separate sightings. The noise we're generating with the generator and cooking is attracting them over time. "How long before numbers are a problem?" I asked. "At the current rate of increase, my estimate is 7 to 10 days. I looked at the map on the wall they'd been keeping. The camp property and a radius of about 10 miles, with sightings marked in red. The density of red was heaviest in the southwest, which was the direction of Belden. The northwest, across the reservoir, was clean. "What's on the other side of the reservoir?" I asked. "Hill country. State forest. A few private properties." Philip looked at the map. "About 30 miles north, there's a town called Granger. Small, maybe 2,000 people. We have no information about its status." "What's the road connection?" "You'd have to go around the reservoir. There's no bridge, which means south to the access road, east to the county road, then north. It's at least an hour by road. Or across the water, Harriet said. She was a matter-of-fact woman with paint on her hands that had been there since I'd met her, either dried from before the apocalypse or from some project she was still running. The canoes and the boat go across in 15 minutes. I looked at the reservoir. There are no sightings from the north side, I said slowly. None, Philip confirmed. I filed this away. Day 4. I also did something I'd been putting off since day 1 of this situation. I sat down and talked to each of my inmates individually, with as much privacy as the crowded camp allowed, and had a direct conversation about the situation and what I needed from them. Roach I talked to first, because I'd already established the most working relationship with him. I asked him what he wanted out of the current situation. Same as you, he said, to be alive in a week. And after that? He was quiet. I was going to serve out my time. There wasn't a big plan after that. My daughter, she's 17. I haven't seen her in 2 years. Her mother moved them to Portland. I had this idea. I'd get out, get a job, build something back up. He paused. I don't know what that looks like now. Her, I said. He looked at me. That's what it looks like now, I said. Same as it did before, just harder to get to. He nodded slowly. Aldous was harder. He was large and quiet in the way that some large, quiet people are actually simmering and some are actually calm, and I'd been trying to figure out which kind he was for 3 days. He turned out to be actually calm. He had a way of looking at problems that was very physical. He thought about space and weight and force, not ideas. When I described the perimeter situation and the sighting numbers, he immediately started looking at the fence from where we were sitting and thinking about where the weak points were. I can reinforce 3 sections in a day, he said, given the right materials. What do you need? Lumber. The camp probably has some. Maybe an hour of you and another guy to hold things. I spent part of that afternoon holding lumber, while Aldous hammered with a borrowed hammer, and he was accurate in his estimate, and the east fence was measurably better for it. Kevin Shoup's conversation was the strangest, and I'm going to record it in detail because it changed how I understood the group dynamics I was managing. He'd been useful with Lily, consistent, patient, good with her, in a way that suggested he'd been good with his own kids. But I'd kept him in the category of liability because of the initial panic, and because fraud criminals, in my experience, have a specific relationship with reality that isn't always functional in a crisis. They're used to constructing alternative versions of things, and they don't always know when to stop. I want to be honest with you, he said, when we sat down together in a quiet corner of the dining hall. I'd appreciate that. What I'm convicted of, the fraud charge, it wasn't exactly what the conviction says. They never are. No, but, he paused, the fund I managed, the embezzlement charge. I was moving money, yes, but I was moving it out of accounts held by people who had used that fund to launder money from some very specific operations. Trafficking operations. I had documentation of it. I was going to the FBI with it. I looked at him. I know how that sounds, he said. I know every person in prison has a story, but I want you to understand something about what I can do that might be useful to you right now. Before I went to the fund, I spent 12 years in logistics, international supply chain management. I know how to move things, store things, distribute things, keep track of complex inventories across large operations. Whatever situation we're in right now, it's a supply chain problem, and I'm good at supply chain problems. I sat with this for a moment. The part of me that spent 18 years in corrections was cataloging his claims and filing them under unverified. The part of me that had just done an inventory of 32 people's resources and found them inadequate was thinking about what he'd just described. If you're useful, you'll demonstrate it, I said. That's the only verification system I've got right now. Fair, he said. And Shoup. Yeah. The first time I think you're managing me, we're done. He held my gaze. Understood. I gave him the supply manifests. He spent the rest of the day reorganizing our accounting in a way that surfaced 2 things we hadn't noticed: a hidden pantry in the camp's kitchen that had been used for cooking competition supplies, 20 pounds of sugar, 10 pounds of flour, baking powder, yeast, salt, and 16 cans of various preserved goods, and an error in the water purification calculations that meant we had more clean water capacity than Gareth had estimated. Not huge improvements, but the kind of thing that matters when you're doing exact calculations. Doug Farley. I didn't have a private conversation with, because every time I tried to find an opening, he wasn't where I expected him to be. He moved quietly and without drawing attention, and was somehow always doing something, helping with the kitchen, carrying things, making himself generally useful in a way that created no friction and no profile. I kept watching him. He kept being fine. Aaron Tillett spent day 4 sitting near the reservoir with a fishing line he'd improvised from supplies he'd found in one of the camp's activity sheds. He caught 3 fish. He cleaned them himself without being asked, and brought them to the kitchen without saying anything about it. Carla Weeks helped in the medical area. Gareth, it turned out, had been a paramedic for 12 years, and she had been a home health aide for 9 years, before other things intervened in her life, and they found a working language quickly. She was good with the children, too. Different from Shoup's approach, less gentle and more direct, and it worked on kids in a different way. Lily, who had accepted Shoup's gentleness, seemed to respond to Carla's matter-of-fact treatment with something close to relief, like being talked to normally was itself comforting. On the evening of day 4, I had a conversation with Pete that I should also record. He found me out by the bus. I'd been doing some work on it, things I'll explain shortly, and he sat on the bumper and watched for a while before speaking. "I've been trying to reach my daughter," he said. "And? Nothing. No signal at all now. It's been dead since yesterday morning. Cell towers are going down," I said. I didn't add what I thought about what that meant, because he already knew what it meant. "Ray." He said my name the way he only said it when he was about to say something difficult. "I need to ask you something directly." "Okay. When this is over, if this is over, what happens to the inmates?" I looked at him. "I mean it practically," he said. "We're running a transport operation without any functioning infrastructure behind it. There's no prison to deliver to. There's no DOC contact I can reach. If and when there's a resolution, are we going to have to answer for releasing their wrist cuffs? For," he gestured at the bus, at the camp, at everything, "for all of this." "We did what the situation required," I said. "That's not a legal answer." "No, it's not." I looked at the bus. "Pete, there's a good chance that whatever legal framework was going to govern the answer to your question doesn't exist right now in any practical sense. I'm the ranking officer. I'll take the responsibility for the decisions. But you need to understand that the calculus I'm using right now is not the calculus of the DOC employee handbook. It's the calculus of keeping people alive." He was quiet for a while. "Jimmy's scared," he said. "I know. He's holding it together, but he's scared." "So am I," I said. "So are you." "Yeah." He looked at the bus. "What are you doing to it?" "Making it more useful." Let me explain what I'd been doing to the bus, because it becomes important. The bus was a 35-foot Type A transport vehicle, heavy steel frame, reinforced panels, small barred windows. It was already more structurally solid than anything the camp had. What it needed was improvements that made it a better working platform. First thing I did, I pulled the outer storage compartments open on both sides and reorganized the contents so that heavy, hard items were accessible quickly and light items were stored deep. This meant the bolt cutters, the pry bar, the fire extinguisher, and 2 of the fuel cans were in the right compartment, accessible from outside the bus, without opening the main door. Second, I found a roll of heavy mesh screen in the camp's maintenance shed and used it to cover the 2 windows on the driver's side that had the smallest bars. Not because the bars would fail, but because the screen added a layer between any infected and the glass. One more thing for them to push through. Mattered at the margins. Third, I pulled the 2 bench seats at the very back of the bus. They folded up and latched, which I hadn't known until I examined them, and created a small cargo area. This let me build a storage system for our most important supplies, where they were separated from the seating area and accessible through the rear emergency door. Fourth, and this one I'm the most proud of, I found the camp had a welder in its maintenance shed, a small wire feed unit with 2 partial tanks of gas. I am not a welder, but Aldous turned out to have worked construction for 4 years before his conviction, and construction people often know welding at least somewhat, and he and I looked at the bus's undercarriage for a while, and then I explained what I wanted. The bus had a flat steel skid plate under the engine area. It came standard, to protect the engine from road debris. What it didn't have was coverage under the rear transmission and fuel tank area. We spent 4 hours running a rough welded apron of steel sheeting, again from the maintenance shed, to cover that gap. The welds were not beautiful, Aldous said so himself, but they'd hold, and now the belly of the bus had less exposed vulnerability. I stood back and looked at the bus after those modifications, and it still looked like a prison transport bus. But it felt different to me, like something we'd built, not just something we were riding in. Day 5. The number of infected cited from the perimeter on day 5 was 11. Philip tracked it with the methodical precision of a man who'd spent 20 years teaching teenagers to think systematically. He had a chart. He showed it to me at the morning meeting, a thing Denton had started, gathering the core decision-makers each morning to share information. The core decision-makers were Denton, Gareth, Philip, me, and this was not a decision I made alone, but one that emerged from several conversations, Tyler Roach. The camp's people had started talking to him naturally over the first 2 days, because he knew the local roads better than anyone, and because he had a way of listening to people's concerns and responding to the actual concern rather than the stated question, which is a skill I hadn't expected from him, but which was evidently real. Nobody said anything formal about Roach being at the table. He just was. The 11 sightings on day 5 were distributed around the perimeter, not clustered, not coordinated, individual infected drawn by sound or smell, arriving at different points and then milling at the fence line. Philip had tracked the times, all 11 between 4 p.m. and 8 p.m. the previous evening. They're more active in the late afternoon and evening, Aaron said. He was at the back of the room. He'd started attending these meetings on day 4 without anyone inviting him or objecting to his presence. Why? Philip asked. Temperature, Aaron said. Cooler in the evening. They seem to metabolize heat poorly. During the hottest part of the day, they're slower, less active. I think direct sun affects them. Most of what I've seen from the window is heavy afternoon activity being replaced by dormancy. Kind of. Everyone looked at him. I've been watching them carefully, he said. Through the window, through the fence. I've been trying to understand the movement patterns. What else have you observed? Denton asked. He thought about it. They don't sleep, not like we do. But there's a reduced state, less movement, less directional seeking. It happens mostly in the 2-3 o'clock afternoon hour, hottest part of the day. If you needed to move through an area with a lot of them, midday in August might be your best window. This information was objectively useful, and nobody said anything about where it came from or who was delivering it. Denton looked at me after the meeting. Your people are good, she said. Some of them, I said. More than some. Yeah, I paused. More than some. Day 5. Afternoon. The twist I hadn't seen coming arrived on foot that afternoon. 2 people came to the camp gate, a man and a woman in their 30s, well-equipped. Good boots, good packs, semi-professional outdoor gear. The man had a rifle, an AR pattern rifle, which was better than most people in the camp had. The woman had a sidearm and a radio that looked military surplus. They identified themselves as Gary Mast and his wife Robin. Gary said he was a former police officer. Robin said she'd been a county health administrator. Denton let them in. At dinner, Gary was personable and direct and said the right things. Asked about the camp situation, offered his experience, talked about other groups they'd passed through. He had that specific social confidence of someone used to being in charge of situations. I watched him the way I've watched 1,000 people on buses and in transport yards over 18 years. Not the words, the behaviors. He ate too fast, like someone who didn't know when the next meal was. That was fine. Lots of people did that now. He made an inventory of the room without looking like he was making an inventory. That was less fine. He looked at my bus, parked in the lot, and he looked at it for about 3 seconds too long, and then looked away. And when Denton mentioned that the camp had 23 people with supplies for, she said several weeks, which was not accurate, but was also not something I'd corrected in this particular conversation. Gary nodded and said 23, that's a good number to work with, which was an unusual response to a piece of information about supply duration. I said nothing at dinner. After dinner, I found Doug Farley at the edge of the dining hall, in the spot he'd found on day 1, where you could see the full room from, and I stood next to him. "The new arrivals," I said. "Yeah," he said. "Your read?" He was quiet for a moment. He had a way of pausing before he said things that I'd come to understand meant he was choosing words, not gathering thoughts. The thoughts were already there. "I've moved product through communities for 4 years," he said. "You learn to spot consolidation behavior, when someone's assessing rather than just experiencing. The guy, Gary, he's not here for the same reasons the others are here. What's he here for? Resources. He's inventorying, which means either he's planning to stay and take a bigger role than they'd naturally give him, or he's planning to leave and come back with more people. And if he leaves and comes back with more people," Farley looked at me, "then the resources don't get shared." I went and told Denton that evening. She was quiet for a long time. "You could be wrong," she said. "I could be," I said, "but I'd rather you know I had the concern than not know. What do you want me to do with it?" "Nothing dramatic, just watch." She nodded. She was a careful person. She didn't overreact, and she didn't dismiss. She filed it in the right place. The next morning, Gary asked to look at the bus. I said yes, because refusing would have told him too much. I walked him around it, explained it was a standard transport vehicle, showed him the exterior modifications in a way that was accurate, but didn't convey their purpose clearly. He asked about the fuel capacity. I gave him the right number. He asked about range. I gave him a conservative estimate. "Nice setup," he said. "You're thinking mobile, not fixed." "I'm thinking adaptable," I said. "Smart." He looked at the perimeter. "This camp's not going to hold, you know that." "Why do you say that?" "It's wooden fence and hope. When the infected numbers get high enough, and they will, it's not going to hold. Philip's numbers suggest 7 to 10 days. He looked at me sideways. "You've got someone doing analysis?" "Yes." "Good." A pause. "Where are you planning to go when this place goes?" "Haven't decided," I said. I had decided. I just hadn't told him. He nodded. The conversation ended naturally. We walked back to the dining hall, and I made note of everything he'd said, and the specific way he'd said it. That night, I found Pete by the bus, and told him my full assessment of Gary Mast. Pete listened, face neutral, then said, "You want to leave before he does?" "I want to leave before his potential friends arrive," I said. "Where are we going?" I had the atlas in my shirt pocket. I pulled it out and showed him the route I'd been thinking about. Not toward the fallen Harwell facility, but 60 miles further north, past it, to a point I'd found while studying the atlas over the last 2 evenings. A spot where a set of marks in the original annotator's pencil suggested something. The number of times a junction had been circled, the specific roads highlighted going out from it, the way the annotations stopped making sense as routing decisions and started looking more like they were pointing at a place to be rather than a place to pass through. There was something at that junction. I didn't know what, but the atlas had been right about the camp note. I was willing to trust it one more time. "There," I said, pointing. Pete looked at the spot. "That's the Oaks River area." "Yeah, that's mostly floodplain and state forest. There's nothing there." "There's a water treatment facility," I said. "It's on the atlas, tiny symbol, but it's there. Water treatment facility means secure building designed for utility operations, its own power hookup, water source on site. Nobody's going to drive a horde of infected to a water treatment plant in the middle of state forest because nobody thinks about it." He looked at it for a while. "You're guessing." "I'm extrapolating from available evidence." "Same thing." "Yeah," I said. but it's all I've got." He handed the atlas back. "When?" "2 days. Give Denton time to prepare. Give us time to load up properly. And I need to have a conversation I've been putting off." "With who?" I looked toward the bus, where Lily had fallen asleep in the front seat, with her backpack still on her lap. "With her, about whether she comes with us or stays with the camp." Day 6. The conversation with Lily was hard, in the specific way that conversations with children are hard, when you're being honest with them. Because being honest with children requires you to strip away the softening language you normally use, and get to the actual true thing. And the actual true things in this situation were not comfortable. She was awake early, sitting on the dock, watching the reservoir. I sat next to her. "Is my mom coming back?" she asked. She'd had 5 days to think about this answer. She was asking me because she already knew, and she wanted to have it confirmed by someone who wasn't going to try to make it softer. "No," I said. "I don't think so." She looked at the water. "The people here," I said, "are good people. Denton is a good person. Gareth knows medical things. There are other kids here." "You're leaving," she said. "How do you know that?" "You've been loading the bus since yesterday." "Yeah," I said, "we're leaving. And you can come with us, or you can stay here. Both are real choices. I'm not going to tell you what to do." She looked at the water for a long time. "Where are you going?" "North. To see if there's a place that's better defended." "Is here not safe?" "Here is okay for now. We're not sure about later." She thought about this. "Carla's going with you?" "Yes." "And the nice man with the soup stories?" "Kevin?" "Yes, he's coming." "And Tyler?" "Yes." She thought some more. "If I stay here, you're not coming back." "I might." "But you might not." "I might not," I said. She picked up a small stone from the dock and threw it into the reservoir. It made a small circle. "I'm going to come with you," she said. "Okay. Because I don't know those people. And I know you." "Okay," I said. She picked up another stone. "Also because that man Gary has bad eyes." I looked at her. "Bad eyes," she said. "Like when someone looks at you but they're looking at what you have. 8 years old." "Yeah," I said. "He does." Day 6. Departure. I told Denton the morning of day 6 that we were leaving. She took it the way I expected. Not hurt, not offended. The response of someone who understands how survival mathematics works. She asked where we were going. I told her north, toward the water treatment facility on the Oaks River. I showed her on the atlas. She looked at it, then at me. "We could come," she said. "All of us." "You could," I said. "But you've got a working situation here for now. And moving 23 people is a different kind of operation than moving 9. You don't trust Gary." "No. Neither do I," she said. "I'm going to deal with that. I know you will." "If you find something good," she said, "send word somehow." "I will." She handed me 4 gallons of fuel from the camp's supply, 2 boxes of food, and a radio, the portable handheld kind, that she said was set to the frequency they were using for camp communications. "In case we can reach each other," she said. Gareth pressed a canvas bag of medical supplies into my hands without comment. Philip gave me a printed copy of his sighting log and a notation of the wind direction patterns he'd observed, which affected where infected came from. Practical and precise to the last. Harriet gave me a jar of jam. It had a label in her own handwriting. Strawberry, June 2024. She'd made it before all of this. It seemed like something from another world. I put it very carefully in the cargo area of the bus. We loaded up at first light. I drove out through the gate, and Denton closed it behind us. And the last thing I saw in the mirror was her standing there with the radio in her hand, watching us go. Day 6. On the road. The road north from Camp Wyeth was better than I'd feared, and worse than I'd hoped. Roach navigated. The route I'd planned took us north on county roads that skirted the edge of the state forest, avoiding the main arteries entirely. We were trading speed for avoidance. The county roads were 2-lane paved, occasionally dipping into gravel, and they were empty in a way that felt different from the emptiness of the first days. This wasn't surprised emptiness. the emptiness of something that had just happened. This was settled emptiness, like the roads had accepted their new role. We made good time for the first hour. At mile marker 18 on County Road 7, we found the strangest thing I've seen in this entire situation, and I want to record it accurately. There was a stretch of road about a quarter-mile long, bordered on both sides by cornfields in their late summer state. 8-foot stalks, thick with leaves, completely opaque. And in this stretch of road, coming toward us, was a column of infected. Not a mob, not a cluster, a column. They were walking in roughly the same direction, south, in a loose but consistent line. Not organized in any deliberate sense, not marching or coordinated, but all moving the same way, all pointed south, a river of infected flowing down the road. I counted while I sat there with the bus stopped and the engine off. 30, 40. More coming from around the curve to the north. Maybe 60 in total. They all faced south. They all moved south. "What is that?" Jimmy said. "I don't know," I said. "Why are they all going the same direction?" "Something drawing them," Aaron said. He was at the window, watching with that specific focus he brought to everything. Sound or smell coming from the south, consistent enough that they're all orienting to it. "What's south?" Roach asked. I thought about it. Belden. And east of Belden, the main hospital. "The note said don't go to the hospital," Pete said. "Yeah." We sat in silence and watched 60 infected walk past us, going south, not turning toward us, not sensing us with the engine off, and us silent, in a stopped vehicle, set slightly into the shoulder. The sound of them was that formless hum, that chorus of mistuned frequencies, a little louder and more complex when there were many of them together. It took about 4 minutes for the whole column to pass. Then the road was empty. I started the engine and went north. Nobody said much for a while after that. "Something's calling them," Carla said, around the 3rd hour of driving. She'd been thinking about it, clearly, since the column on County Road 7. Aaron said sound or smell, I said. "But from 60 miles south, what sound carries 60 miles? "Not a single continuous sound," Aaron said from the back. "More likely a series of attractors. Each one creates sound, draws infected from the near radius. That group creates more sound, draws more from further out. Like a chain reaction. Something at the hospital is alive," Roach said. "Everyone absorbed that. Or was," he added. "There's nothing we can do about it," I said. "No," Roach said. "Just saying." We reached the Oaks River floodplain area around early afternoon of day 6. The atlas was right. There was a water treatment facility at the end of a gravel access road that turned off County Road 7, about 3 miles north of the Oaks River Bridge. The road was gated, padlocked, standard utility lock, and the gate was steel pipe, not chain link, and behind it, I could see the facility itself, a cluster of 3 concrete block buildings, cylindrical holding tanks, a chain link perimeter fence with barbed wire, and a water tower. No signs of infected, no signs of other people. I got out and cut the lock, and we drove in. The facility was clean in the way institutional buildings are clean when they've been closed properly. Not abandoned in haste, everything shut down in sequence. The generator had been disconnected from the grid but left intact. There was a fuel tank on site, diesel, for the backup power, and it was 3/4 full. The main building had an office with maps and technical manuals, a break room with a small refrigerator, empty and clean, a bathroom that had running water from the holding tank overhead, and a utility space full of the tools and materials of water treatment, chemicals I didn't fully understand, pipe fittings, gaskets, a full workshop setup. More immediately useful, the facility had a supply closet that included first aid materials, 2 sets of coveralls, rain gear, heavy rubber gloves, safety goggles, and a full container of a concentrated bleach solution that had a dozen survival uses. The perimeter fence was better than the camp's. Chain link with barbed wire, standard utility grade, and it ran completely around the facility without any gap except the main gate, which now I had locked behind us. I walked the perimeter. 2 access points, the main vehicle gate and a personnel gate on the east side. The east gate was padlocked from the inside, with the same standard lock I'd cut on the main gate, which told me it hadn't been used in a while. The buildings were solid concrete block. The windows were high and small, industrial-grade wire glass. The whole thing was about 3 acres inside the fence, with the bus in the corner by the main building and room to move around it. I stood in the middle of this facility and felt, for the first time in 6 days, something that might have been the very beginning of relief. Not safety. I don't think I believed in safety anymore, but possibility. Okay, I said to nobody in particular. Okay, Pete said. This is where we figure out what we're doing next. Day 7 and 8. The facility. I'm going to move faster through these 2 days because the important things are in what happened after, not in the hours of work that filled them. But the work matters, and I want to note it. Day 7. Aldous and I and whoever was available went over every inch of the facility structure. We found no structural damage, no points of entry on the main fence, other than the 2 gates, both of which we secured with secondary wire ties after cutting the original locks. A small generator utility room that had its own secured door. A diesel fuel tap from the main tank that we could use to supplement the bus's tank. And, in the workshop, something I hadn't expected, a chest of tools that included welding equipment better than what we'd had at the camp. Farley, without being asked, spent day 7 doing something I only understood when he showed me the result. He'd been walking the tree line outside the fence, and he came back with a hand-drawn map on the back of a technical manual page, showing the terrain around the facility in about a 1-mile radius. Every place where a vehicle could approach, where terrain features might funnel movement, where the infected sightings were most likely to come from based on prevailing wind and nearby roads. It was good tactical mapping, better than anything Philip had done at the camp. I looked at it. Where'd you learn this? I moved product across 3 counties for 4 years, he said. You either understand terrain and approach routes, or you get caught. You got caught anyway, I said. I got caught because of an informant, not because of my route planning. Fair enough. I put the map on the wall of the operations office, and we started marking it with the information we gathered each day. Choupet's supply accounting had, by day 7, grown into a full system on paper. Manifests, daily consumption tracking, an estimate of the duration of each resource at current usage, a projected restock priority list. It was impeccably organized and clearly the work of someone who'd spent a career managing numbers. He'd also found, through a methodical search of every cabinet and closet in every building, an additional food cache, a box of MREs, 8 of them, that someone had kept in the facility as emergency supplies, military surplus MREs, a couple of years old but fine. How did you find those? I asked. I searched every cabinet, he said. Every one, including the ones that didn't seem likely. He paused. 14 years of financial due diligence. You learn to look in the places people think aren't worth looking in. Day 8. The first incident at the fence. 7 infected arrived at the perimeter, around 4 in the afternoon. They came from the south, following the access road, drawn by, I think, the sound of the generator, which we'd been running during the morning to charge things. We'd turned it off at noon and they'd arrived at 4, which suggested the drift of the sound and the response time. They hit the fence and stopped, pressed against it, moved laterally along it the way they do, heads forward, seeking. The fence held perfectly. Chain link with barbed wire, nothing they could do with it. Their limited cognitive function giving them no tool for find a gate and open it. They just pushed against the wire and moved along the barrier and eventually drifted away. I watched them with Aaron, both of us on the near side of the fence 20 feet back. 7, Aaron said. He wrote it in the sighting log he'd taken over from Philip when we left the camp. From the south, late afternoon, consistent with the temperature pattern. We need to run the generator in the morning only, I said. And we need to keep the noise down inside the fence. Yeah. I looked at the 7 infected doing their slow sweep of the fence exterior. What do you see when you look at them? I asked. It was a genuine question. He was quiet for a moment. People, he said. Still, I know they're not, but it's hard to stop seeing it. Yeah, I said. The 19-year-old I hit, Kyle, I've thought about Kyle every day for 2 years in a cell. I think about him differently now. I didn't say anything. That sounds wrong, he said. I mean, I don't think about him less. I think about what his last year would have looked like. What it would have looked like, or what it did look like. Both. He paused. If he'd survived, if he'd gotten to go through all of this, I wonder if he'd have handled it better than me. You're handling it fine, I said. I'm handling the part I'm good at, he said. The watching and thinking part. I'm not sure about the rest. The 7 infected moved away from the fence eventually, drawn by something else, or just drifting in their formless way. We went back inside. Day 9. Pete found me in the morning, and his face was doing the complicated thing it had been doing since we left the highway. I'd been watching it get more complicated for 9 days, and I'd been waiting for this conversation. Sit down, I said. He sat. What's on your mind? He put his hands flat on the table. I've been in contact with a military unit. I looked at him. The radio. Denton's radio that she gave us. There's a military frequency running. It comes on at 3 a.m., 2-minute transmission. It's an automated signal giving coordinates for a collection point. Military convoy, it says. Evacuation. The coordinates are about 70 miles east-northeast of here, on I-64 east of Cartwell City. I waited. I've been listening to it since day 4, he said. I've been thinking about whether to tell you. And now you're telling me. Yes. Why didn't you tell me before? He looked at his hands. Because I knew what you'd think about it, and I knew you'd say we weren't ready. And I was. He stopped. I was trying to figure out if you were right. And? I don't know. He looked up. Ray, there's a daughter I haven't heard from in 9 days. There's a legitimate military evacuation signal on a legitimate frequency. I understand the note on the truck. I understand the wariness. I know those things. But if there's any chance of reaching, Pete, I said it the way you say someone's name when you want to slow them down. How many times have you transmitted on that frequency? He was quiet. Pete, twice, he said. I sat very still. I gave them our approximate location and our status, he said. Personnel count, vehicle type. I was careful about what You told a military frequency that we're a prison transport bus with 6 inmates, 3 officers, and a child, and you gave them our approximate location. Yes. And what was the response? They acknowledged. They said they could have a pickup team at our location within 48 hours if we stayed put and stayed on that frequency. I thought about this for a long time. The truck, I said. Don't trust the uniforms. They take your weapons and leave you. That could have been written by anyone about any. Did you tell them about our weapons? He stopped. Did they ask? I said. They asked for our... He stopped again. They asked for our supply status, including defensive capabilities. I stood up, walked to the window, looked at the fence, the tree line, the water tower. When's the 48 hours up? I asked. Tomorrow afternoon. I turned around. You understand why I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen? Yes. And you understand that depending on who you talk to and what they're actually planning, we may have a problem. I was trying to help. I know you were. And I did know. I knew exactly why he'd done it. The same daughter he'd been trying to reach for 9 days. The same hope that there was a system somewhere that was still functioning, that the world still had a correct authority, and that authority was coming. That's a very human hope, and I don't fault him for it. But we need to decide what we're doing in the next 20 hours, because something is either coming here to help us or coming here for a different reason, and I need to know what we're going to do either way. I assembled everyone that evening. Not just the officers, everyone, all of the inmates. Lily, who understood more than I wanted her to. I put it all on the table. Pete's radio contact, the 48-hour timeline, the potential convoy, the message on the truck, my uncertainty about what we were actually dealing with. Then I waited. Brett Aldis said, "What do we lose by checking it out?" "Potentially a lot," Farley said. "If they're running a consolidation operation, grabbing resources including vehicles and weapons from survivor groups, then bringing them here puts the facility at risk." "Or," Roach said, "it's exactly what it says. military evacuation, and we're sitting here being paranoid when there's an actual exit. Both things are possible, Aaron said. So what do? Jimmy asked. We go to them, I said. But we go on our terms. We don't wait here for them to come to us. That puts us in a static position, on their timeline, where they know what we have, and we don't know anything about them. What are our terms? Carla asked. We drive there ourselves. We look at the situation before we commit to anything. If it looks like what it says it is, we talk to them. If it looks like something else, we don't stay. And the facility? Shoop asked. We bring what we need. We leave the rest. Silence. There's one more thing, I said. I looked at my 6 inmates. We are 60-something miles from a potential evacuation zone. We are on a bus. The question of what happens to your status, your legal status, when we get there, is something I've been thinking about. I paused. I can't give you freedom that I don't have the authority to give, but I can tell you that what you've done over the last 9 days matters to me, and I will say so, clearly, and on the record. Whatever I have the authority to say, I'll say. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Roach said, what about Lily? What about her? If this is an actual evacuation, she should get on whatever transport there is, even if we don't. I looked at Lily, who was sitting in the front seat of the bus, listening. That's the plan, I said. Day 10. Loading and departure. We loaded the bus before dawn on day 10. Shoop's inventory work paid off here. We knew exactly what we had, and exactly what to prioritize. I won't list it all again, but the core. Full fuel, full water, full food for 6 days, the best of the medical supplies, the tools most likely to be needed, and the weapons. The weapons situation, which I want to note clearly. I still had Pete's and Jimmy's sidearms. The shotgun, 8 shells remaining. I had the bolt cutters and the pry bar as impact tools. I had the hunting knife from the Brierley store. Aldous had, at some point in the last 4 days, fashioned a short metal rod from some pipe fittings in the workshop into something he called a convincer, which was a very practical tool for the situation. Roach had said nothing about needing a weapon, and I'd given him nothing, but I'd noticed that the heavy flashlight from the bus's emergency kit was always somehow near him. I gave Carla Weeks the hunting knife. You sure? She said. You know how to use it? She did. She'd demonstrated this ability once, at some point in her life, in ways that had gotten her convicted of attempted murder. In the current situation, what I needed was someone behind me who knew how to use a knife, and that was her. She took it. The road to I-64 took us through terrain that was different from the county road network we'd been using. We had to go back south to pick up a state highway that actually connected to the interstate infrastructure. And going south meant going toward Belden again, and Belden meant more infected. The column we'd seen on day 6 was a clue, not an anomaly. Whatever was drawing the infected south had pulled a lot of them out of the surrounding area, which should have meant clearer roads to our north and east. It did, mostly. The first 20 miles were almost clear, an occasional infected individual at the side of the road, staring at nothing, turning toward us as we passed, and then falling behind, unable to match our speed. Animals again, the way Aaron had said. No tools, no plans, no understanding of what they were watching go by. At mile 22, we entered what I can only describe as a dead zone. Not literally. I don't mean an absence of infected. I mean an absence of everything. A stretch of road about 6 miles long, where there were no abandoned vehicles, no debris, no signs of the chaotic flight that marked most of the roads we'd traveled. The road was clean. The fields on both sides were undamaged. The farmhouses we passed were closed and still, and looked structurally intact. This is wrong, Farley said. Why? Jimmy said. Because everything before this stretch was chaos, and everything after should be chaos, and this is clean. He leaned toward the window. Someone maintained this. I slowed the bus slightly. Cleared it, Roach said. Someone cleared the vehicles. Pushed them to the sides, probably. Look at the drainage ditches. I looked. He was right. The ditches on both sides of the road had vehicles in them, pushed clear of the road surface. Recently, or at least more recently than day one. Someone was keeping this road clear. Why would you keep a road clear? I said, mostly to myself. Movement, Farley said. If you're running an operation and you need to move vehicles regularly, you keep your route clear. What kind of operation? Could be the military convoy, Pete said. He was very careful in how he said it, very neutral. Could be, I said. Could be something else. I kept driving, but I kept the speed below what I'd been running, and I watched both sides of the road, and I kept the bus toward the center of the lanes where I had the best sight lines in multiple directions. At the edge of the dead zone, as it rejoined the normal chaos of abandoned vehicles and road debris, there was a group of people. Not infected. A dozen survivors, on foot, moving north on the shoulder. They had packs and children with them, and they were walking with the focused economy of movement that means you've been walking a long time. I stopped the bus. The person at the front of the group, a woman, maybe 45, wearing a state park service jacket that was dusty and torn at one sleeve, walked up to my window. "Where are you coming from?" I asked. "The checkpoint," she said. "South of here, on 64. "The military checkpoint?" She looked at me for a moment. "Is that what they're calling it?" "What would you call it?" "They took our vehicles," she said. "Said it was for the collective good, that they needed transport for wider operations. They said we'd get transport vouchers." Her voice was very flat, very controlled. "There are no transport vouchers. When we asked to leave, they said we could, but on foot. 40 people walking north on foot, through zombie-infested countryside. Don't trust the uniforms." "How many people at the checkpoint?" I asked. 80. 100 in uniforms. More vehicles than I've ever seen at one military installation, including the time I drove past Fort Bragg. Armed? Very. Checkpoint vehicles, tactical units, road-blocking equipment. She looked at the bus. "Don't go down there with that bus," she said. "They will take it, and they'll keep the people if they think the people are useful, and they'll turn away the people they don't want, and you might not get a vote on which is which." I looked at the group behind her. 40-something people, children among them, moving north. "Where are you going?" I asked. "We don't know yet," she said. "Away from there." I thought about the water treatment facility 60 miles northwest, about Denton at Camp Wyeth, about the resources we'd mapped and the terrain we'd studied, and the specific logistics Shupe had been running. "Listen," I said, "get in the bus." She looked at me. "Get whoever you can fit in the bus," I said. "There's a facility 60 miles northwest. It's not perfect, but it's defensible, and it's got water and fuel, and people who've been thinking about this problem for 9 days. We'll take as many as we can carry, and I'll give the rest the coordinates and the route." She looked at me for what felt like a long time. Then she turned and called back to the group. They filled the bus. 43 people in a bus designed for 36, and 6 of the 36 were in ankle shackles. It was crowded in ways that I'm not going to spend time describing. Lily ended up in the storage compartment of the back, which she seemed to find an adventure rather than a deprivation. I gave the remaining 7 in the group, the ones who couldn't fit, the atlas, the coordinates marked in pencil, and the route I'd taken, and I told them what to look for and what to avoid, and I told them Denton's radio frequency. Then I drove northwest. I am not going to the checkpoint. That needs to be clear. I need it on the record. Whatever Pete's reasons were for making contact, whatever the signal says, I am not driving this bus into a situation where someone with authority and armament can look at what we have and make decisions about whether and how we keep it. I understand that's a significant statement. I understand that there may be actual organized government effort at that checkpoint that is genuinely trying to coordinate recovery. I understand that I am, functionally, refusing to engage with a potential lawful authority. But I have 6 inmates in this bus, and I have obligations to them that have changed in nature over 10 days but have not ended. And I have 43 survivors who just told me what happens when you bring your vehicle to that checkpoint. And I have Lily in the back with her purple backpack, and she is 8 years old. and I am not putting her in a situation where someone else decides if she's worth keeping. So we went northwest. Day 10. Return to the facility. It was tight getting 43 additional people into the water treatment facility. It was not impossible. People are more adaptable than they think they are when the alternative is standing in a zombie-infested field. I got back to the facility at late afternoon. The gate was as I'd left it. Inside, everything undisturbed, our supplies intact, the generator silent, we'd left it off. The fence perimeter clear when Farley did a quick check. We got everyone inside. Shupe immediately started doing his thing, talking to the new people, getting information, building a new supply manifest that incorporated their resources. A few of them had good things. One man, Walter, had been some kind of homesteader before and was carrying seeds, real seeds. Vegetable seeds in paper packets, labeled. He'd been carrying them since day one because he understood, on some level, that the longest game mattered. I sat down with the new people's de facto leader, the woman from the State Park Service jacket. Her name was Claire, and she was actually a state park ranger, hence the jacket. "What's east of here?" she asked. "I'm trying to understand the geography." I showed her Farley's terrain map. She looked at it with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent years reading the land. She added 3 things I hadn't marked. A fire lookout station on a hill about 4 miles east, accessible by a service road, that would give us line-of-sight visibility over a significant radius. A seasonal camping area about 2 miles north that might have propane canisters still in storage, and a maintained wildlife corridor that ran northwest through the state forest, which she said was wide enough for a vehicle if we needed an emergency egress that wasn't on any road. "I'm keeping you," I said. "I was going to say the same thing," she said. Day 11. The fire lookout was real. Farley and Claire and Aaron walked out to it in the morning, using the low-infected midday window, and came back 4 hours later with confirmation. Steel tower, glass observation cab at the top, intact and lockable, with a clear line of sight to the main road 7 miles away, and to a secondary road to the north. "We can see what's coming," Aaron said, "hours before it arrives." "Shoop. Then we have hours to prepare rather than minutes." Yes. The camping area was also real. Farley did that run the same day, taking Aldous with him, and they came back with 8 propane canisters in various states of fullness, averaging maybe half, which doubled our generator fuel estimate. Walter started organizing a growing area, 2 of the facility's south-facing concrete apron sections that got full sun. He didn't have soil yet, but he had seeds, and a plan, and a way of talking about it that made people feel like it was actually going to happen, which was its own kind of value. The perimeter sighting count for day 11, 12, from the south and southeast, consistent with wind direction. No military vehicles, no radio contact from Pete's frequency. I'd asked him not to transmit again, and he hadn't, and I believed him. Day 12. I want to talk about Kevin Shoop. On day 12, he came to me with a piece of paper covered in numbers. He sat down across from me in the operations office and slid it across the desk with both hands, which was a gesture that belonged in a boardroom and was completely out of place here and also completely characteristic. "The resource projection," he said. I looked at it. He'd extended his calculations, not just for our original 9, not just for our current 52, but with growth variables factored in. How the numbers changed if people arrived, how they changed if we lost people, what the critical thresholds were for each resource category. It was precise and comprehensive, and showed that at current consumption, we had about 22 days of comfortable supply and about 35 days of survival supply, at the end of which we would need significant new resource acquisition. 35 days, I said. Roughly. And by then, we need to have either found new food sources or established production. Or both. He pointed at Walter's projected growing area. If he gets a growing cycle started in the next 2 weeks, by day 35 we have supplemental production. Not enough on its own, but enough to meaningfully extend the projection. And the protein problem? Aaron caught fish again today. 3. He said the reservoir's untouched, probably better stocked than before, since nobody's been fishing it. That's a renewable protein source. It's not enough for 52 people. No, but it's something. I looked at the numbers. You were really good at your job, I said. Yes, he said. That's why it's frustrating that the job I did well was also partly used for things I should have walked away from. How much was partly? He looked at the table. 60%, he said. I've had 10 days to stop lying to myself about it. I looked at him for a moment. Okay, I said. Okay. The 60% that was wrong, you know what it was. The rest still had value. Use the rest. I stood up. Continue the accounting. He nodded. He folded his hands on the table. My daughter's name is Rachel, he said. She's 7. Her mother, we weren't together when I was arrested. But Rachel. He stopped. We're going to figure out how to find out, I said. How? I don't know yet. But if the answer is anywhere, it's somewhere we're going to reach eventually. That's the plan. I didn't have a better plan than that. But it was a real plan, as much as anything was real right now. Day 14. I need to talk about what happened on day 14, because it's the thing that forced the next decision. Farley was in the fire lookout. He'd taken to doing the morning observation shift, climbing the service road before dawn, and sitting in the cab with a pair of binoculars from the camp's activity shed, watching the roads. He came back at 9 a.m. and found me immediately. 2 vehicles, he said, military type, on the main road, came from the east, stopped at the county road junction, then turned west. West was toward us. How far? 7 miles when I saw them, moving slowly, checking things out. I looked at the clock. 9 a.m., 7 miles at a cautious pace. Could be 2 hours. Could be 4. They're looking for the bus, Pete said. He was standing behind Farley. His face had gone through several things in the last few seconds, and was settling on something that wasn't quite guilt, but was adjacent to it. They tracked the frequency triangulation. When I transmitted twice from the facility, they would have been able to... Pete, I said. I'm sorry, he said. I thought I was doing the right thing. I know, and I did know. And I also knew that knowing his reason didn't change the situation. Here's what we're going to do. What we did required everyone. 52 people, and we used all of them. In the first 45 minutes, Shoop and Claire organized the non-essential supplies into the fastest possible pack. What could be carried on foot, what had to stay. They worked through the manifest like they'd been working together for months instead of days, making calls quickly, no argument. Aldous and 2 of the stronger men from Claire's group worked on the bus, specifically on the reinforcements that could be done with the workshop materials and the time we had. Walter and a woman named Grace, one of the park rangers group, moved the seeds and the critical tools to the emergency egress point, the wildlife corridor Claire had marked on the map. If we needed to move people on foot, they'd go that way. Aaron and a teenager from the new group, a 16-year-old named Drew who had turned out to be excellent at being quiet and paying attention, went back to the lookout to track the vehicle's progress. Roach found me at the bus. What do you want me to do? He asked. I want you to be ready, I said. For what? For whatever comes next. He looked at me for a moment. You still have the ankle shackles on me. I know. Is that going to continue? I looked at him. Tyler Roach, armed robbery. 9 days of being exactly what he'd appeared to be. A practical, local knowledge, steady-handed person who'd helped keep everyone alive. I took out the key for the ankle shackles, and I unlocked them. He looked down at his ankles, then up at me. We're even, I said. We're not even, he said, but we can work on it. I unlocked everyone else's ankle shackles before I went back to the operations center. Aaron came back from the lookout at 10:47. One vehicle stopped about 2 miles out, he said. The other is still moving, coming down the access road. He paused. There's someone on foot ahead of it, walking. Walking toward us? Toward the facility gate. I went outside. The person walking toward the gate was Pete. He was outside the perimeter, on the access road, facing back toward the approaching vehicle, and then turning to look at me over his shoulder. He looked like a man who'd made a decision and wasn't happy about it, but had made it. Pete, I said through the fence. They're going to ask about the bus, he said. They're going to want it. And he stopped. I'm going to tell them it's gone, that we left before they could find us. I looked at him. I'm going to meet them on the road and tell them we left 2 days ago. I'll give them a false direction. Pete, I know what it is, he said. I know the position I put you in, and I know what it is. This is how I fix it. You don't have to. Ray, he said my name. Just my name. Then take care of Jimmy. He's a good kid. He needs more time to become a different kind of person than he is right now. He turned and walked toward the approaching vehicle. I stood at the fence and watched him go. The vehicle stopped. The interaction was too far away to see clearly. It lasted about 7 minutes. Then the vehicle made a U-turn on the access road and went back east. The second vehicle, which had been stationary 2 miles out, also turned and went east. Pete walked back. He came to the gate. His face had the look of someone who'd used up something he'd been saving. What did you tell them? I asked. That we were a transport bus that passed through. That we'd gone south toward Cartwell City. That there were survivors at a camp south of Belden who might have vehicles. He paused. The camp south of Belden is real. I know. They're not going to find anything there that they can use. I know. I opened the gate. He came through. What are they? National Guard, he said. Or were. Or the remnants of it. They have rank structure, but it's loose. The officer in charge, sergeant, I think, maybe higher. He's doing exactly what the woman told you. Resource consolidation. He believes it's authorized. He believes it's necessary. He paused. He's probably not entirely wrong. But he's not asking anymore. He's taking. Pete sat down on the concrete apron. He asked about weapons 3 times in 7 minutes. I sat next to him. We sat there for a while. What do we do now? He said. I thought about 52 people. Seeds in paper packets. Fish in an untouched reservoir. A terrain map on a wall. 35 days of supply projection. A fire lookout, with line of sight to 7 miles. We keep building, I said. Even without the evacuation? Maybe especially without it. He looked at the water tower, the facility, the bus parked in the corner, modified and reinforced and fueled. I miss my daughter, he said. I know. I don't know if she's alive. I know. He put his hands on his knees and looked at them. Okay, he said. Then again, quieter. Okay. Day 15. I walked the perimeter by myself at dawn, which I'd started doing every day as a kind of taking stock exercise. The fence, the gate, the perimeter apron, the water tower, the 3 buildings, the bus in the corner, the growing area where Walter had started laying down decomposed material he'd been sourcing from the composting organic matter in the tree line. 15 days since the highway, since mile marker 44 on Route 9, the traffic stopping, Carla Weeks saying, "That's strange," and meaning it. I thought about the prison transport manifest still folded in my shirt pocket. Raymond Coulter, transport officer, badge 7741. 6 inmates, 2 guards. Destination, Harwell State Correctional Facility. None of those destinies were current anymore. I thought about what I was instead of what I'd been. The question of what authority I held, what it meant, what it was worth. The DOC didn't exist in any functional sense right now. My badge was a piece of metal. The transport manifest was a record of a thing that was supposed to happen on a day when things had instead gone sideways in every direction. And yet, I'd kept people alive. That wasn't nothing. The 6 people I'd been transporting to a cage had spent 15 days not in a cage, and several of them had done things that mattered, had protected people, found routes, made tools, caught fish, counted supplies. The thing that was supposed to happen had not happened, and in the gap between what was supposed to happen and what did, something else had grown. I'm not saying it was good. I'm not going to sit here in the operator's shed of a water treatment facility and tell this dashcam recording that the zombie apocalypse was secretly a gift. It wasn't. It's not. People died. Pete's daughter might be dead. Lily's mother is dead. Coleman walked into the reservoir. 60 infected are walking south toward a hospital signal because something alive and frightened is still there making noise. What I'm saying is that the gap between what was supposed to happen and what did happen is where I live now. And in that gap, I've got 52 people and a plan. Day 17. Something happened on day 17 that I want to record carefully. I'd sent Aaron and Drew to the fire lookout for the morning shift, which was now a formal rotation. 4-hour shifts, 2 people at a time, radio check every hour. They came back at noon, and Aaron asked to speak to me privately. We went to the operations office. "I need to tell you something," he said, "about myself." "Okay." "The cyclist," he said. "Kyle." "Aaron, you don't have to." "I want to." He sat down. He'd found a way of carrying himself in the last 2 weeks that was different from how he'd been on the bus. Not looser exactly, but more present. Like he'd stopped carrying himself from the outside and started carrying himself from the inside. I've been thinking about the story I told myself for 2 years, about the accident, about what it was. What was it? It was Tuesday afternoon, and I'd been drinking since noon, and I drove the road I drove every day, and I hit a kid who was on a bike lane that I passed every day. His voice was very controlled. There wasn't anything mysterious about it. I wasn't in a bad place. I wasn't dealing with something. I wasn't having a crisis. I just made a decision that I made so many times before that it stopped feeling like a decision. And I've been waiting for 2 years to understand something bigger about it, some meaning. And there isn't one. There's just a kid who's dead, and a reason that's embarrassingly small for something that big. I looked at him. "Out here," he said, "it's easier to understand, because there are things happening that are enormous and arbitrary, and they don't have meaning either. They just are. And somehow that's—" He stopped. "Easier," I said. "Not easier. Different." He looked out the small window. I was watching the road from the lookout this morning, and I thought, if Kyle had survived, would he be watching a road like this? Would he have become someone who was good at watching and thinking? And I don't know. But I can choose what I do with what I'm good at. Right now, that's something. I didn't say anything. I just let him have it. "I wanted to tell someone," he said. "I've been telling the recording. The dash cam. Your recording device." He almost smiled. "I figured you'd already hear it anyway." "Yeah," I said. He went back to his rotation. I sat in the operations office for a while, thinking about that. Day 19. Shoop found me at the door of the operations room with the expression he got when numbers were doing something unexpected. "The supply projection changed," he said. "Better or worse?" "Better. Significantly." He held up the paper. "Walter's growing area is producing faster than he estimated. The soil he's been building is apparently very fertile, some combination of the river sediment and the composting material. He's got early greens coming in that can supplement our intake starting this week. Aaron's fishing is averaging 5 to 7 fish per session, not the 3 I used to baseline. And I found something." "What?" "The facility has a water treatment chemical storage that includes potassium permanganate." He said this like it should mean something. I don't know what that is. It's an oxidizer, used in water treatment. But in the right concentration, it's also a preservative for certain root vegetables. There's a batch of them, beets, turnips, something else I couldn't identify, that someone was growing in a small garden plot on the east side of the facility before abandonment. They're still viable. There's about 30 pounds of root vegetables that we hadn't counted. 30 pounds of root vegetables. Not a lot, in absolute terms. But in the context of careful rationing, it extended things measurably. "How are you finding things other people miss?" I asked. "I look in every cabinet," he said. "Still. Always." Drew, the 16-year-old from Claire's group, had a skill I didn't know about until day 20. He came to me in the afternoon and showed me a notebook, his own, carried in his pack, filled with drawings. Not artistic drawings, technical drawings. Structures, mechanisms, the way things fit together. He'd been drawing the facility for 2 days. The fence layout, the building positions, the sight lines from the water tower, the approach routes from the 3 most likely directions of hostile contact. "Where did you learn to do this?" I asked. "Video games," he said. Base building games. You have to learn to think about structures defensively. I stared at him for a second. I know how that sounds, he said. No, I said. Show me the drawings. He'd identified 2 weaknesses in our perimeter that neither Aldous nor I had caught. A low section of the south fence where the ground had settled, reducing the effective height by about 6 inches, and a blind spot in the water tower sightlines created by the corner of the 3rd building. He'd also drawn a proposed modification to the main gate that would allow us to open and close it from the inside without anyone standing near it. A simple rope and lever system using materials from the workshop. Can you build the gate system? I asked. Aldous could help, he said. They built it in a day and a half. Day 22. The question of the military checkpoint came back around on day 22 in a way I hadn't expected. A man arrived at our gate on foot, alone, no pack, nothing, and stood at the fence and said he needed to talk to whoever was in charge. He'd followed the access road from the main road, and he said he'd been walking for a day and a half from the direction of the east. His name was Owen Bracht. He was thin in the way that meant hungry, not built, and his face had a cut on the cheek that was healing, but had been recent. He was about 50, and had the bearing of someone who'd been in authority at some point, and knew the difference between that and now. He said he'd been at the military checkpoint. He'd been a logistics officer. Not military, civilian, brought in to help organize supply distribution in the first days of the operation. He said the operation had changed character somewhere around day 5, when the senior officer in charge had made a determination that the recovery timeline was going to be much longer than initial assessments, and had shifted priorities accordingly. What does that mean, shifted priorities? I said. We were talking through the fence, him on the outside. It means they stopped planning to distribute resources to survivor groups and started planning to consolidate all resources at a central location, he said. It means the transport they were confiscating wasn't being used to help people. It was being used to move everything to a compound about 30 miles east. There's a compound, a large one, old industrial site. They've been building it since almost the beginning. I think someone planned for this. Someone planned for the outbreak? He looked at me for a long moment. I think someone planned for the recovery phase of the outbreak, the consolidation, which implies they had some advance information about the outbreak itself. I thought about the government report, the data analyst who'd found it, in one of the other stories I'd read about in the old world. The note that said 7 days. The hospital with the drawing infection signal. I didn't say any of this to Owen Bracht. Instead, I said, "Why did you leave?" Because 3 days ago they started turning people away. Not just redirecting them, turning them away into the infected zones with no supplies, no route, nothing. People who'd come to the checkpoint for help. Children. I looked at his face. He wasn't performing. He was too tired to perform. I opened the gate. He came in and sat on the concrete apron, and I brought him water and a can of beans, and I let him eat before I asked him anything else. He ate the way Pete had described people eating who don't know when the next meal is. Quickly, completely focused, with a kind of reverence. After he ate, I asked him what he knew about the compound to the east. He told me. What Owen knew about the compound was, in summary, 200 people, significant military force, the remnants of at least 2 National Guard units plus some civilian armed recruits, substantial stored food, much of it taken from survivor groups, fuel, medical supplies, and 3 generators, defended perimeter, organized command structure. 200 people was more than us, more equipment, more guns. But here's what he also said. The leadership structure was fracturing. The senior officer, a man named Barrett, who Owen described as one of those people who becomes more certain about everything as the situation gets worse, was making decisions without consultation, and at least 2 of his subordinate officers had disagreed with the policy of turning refugees away, and had said so. One of those officers was currently confined to his quarters, which in a voluntary community is the kind of thing that creates exactly as much damage as you'd expect. They're not stable, Owen said. Neither are we, I said. No, but you're unstable in the way where you don't know what you're going to do next. They're unstable in the way where they've made decisions that people inside can't undo. Is there any route to the compound that avoids their patrol range? He thought about it. The wildlife corridor, he said. North side. They're not patrolling the state forest. Claire's corridor. The emergency egress she'd marked on the map. I looked at the terrain map on the wall. Owen, I said, why are you telling me this? Because I need there to be an alternative, he said. I need there to be a place where someone is doing this differently. If that place doesn't exist, we're all just waiting for Barrett. I looked at Farley's map, Claire's corridor, Shoup's supply projection, Drew's defensive drawings, Walter's seeds. It exists, I said. Day 23. The mission. I'm going to call it a mission, because that's what it was, even if it wasn't organized like one. What happened on day 23 was this. 3 people from the Barrett compound showed up at our gate. Not soldiers, civilians, 2 women and a man, who had slipped out in the night through a weak point in the compound's perimeter that Owen had known about and had given us in his briefing. They came to us because Owen had told them, before he left, that there was a place northwest on a water treatment road, and if you could get there, it was worth trying. They had a radio. Not just any radio, a full-range unit, the kind that can transmit on multiple frequencies, including the international disaster frequency, much better equipment than what Denton had given us. And on the radio, 2 days earlier, they had received a signal. Not a military signal, not an automated emergency broadcast. A human voice, clear and deliberate, running on the International Emergency Channel. It was in English, and what it said, repeated every 6 hours in a 30-second burst, was, "Calling all survivor groups in the eastern states. This is the Clearwater Station broadcast. We are a functional civilian recovery operation with medical and food production capacity. If you can reach us, we can help. We are located at," and then a set of coordinates that, when I looked them up on the atlas, placed the station approximately 280 miles to the northwest, in hill country that I knew to be sparsely populated and topographically isolated. 280 miles. A long way, not an impossible way. I sat with the radio and listened to the 30-second signal on the 6-hour cycle, and I thought. Then I called everyone together. I told them about Clearwater Station. I told them about the coordinates, the radio signal, the 280 miles. I told them about Owen's compound and Barrett's operation, and what was happening at the checkpoint. Then I said, I'm not telling you to go. I'm telling you this is a real option. How real? Roach asked. I don't know. The signal sounds real. The people who brought the radio believe it. I have no way to verify it from here. Could be like the checkpoint, Pete said. He said it without edge, just honestly. Could be, I said. Could also be exactly what it says. Silence. Lily said, from her spot in the front seat of the bus. She'd been listening, her head visible over the seat back. Is it far? Yes, I said. But you know how to get there? I think so. She looked at the bus through the windshield. The bus can go that far, she said. With fuel stops, I said, and careful routing. Then we go, she said, like it was obvious. 8 years old. The adults in the room looked at each other. We take the bus, Claire said. We leave the people who don't want to travel here. They've got the facility, the supplies, the perimeter. She looked at me. Owen can run logistics here. Owen, who had been in the back, said, I can do that. The bus holds 36 standard, I said. We have 52 people. Some can drive their own vehicles if we source them. There are vehicles on the main road, Farley said. I've seen 4 or 5 abandoned in good condition within a mile. We could get fuel from. There's a fuel situation at the crossroads, Owen said. The compound's patrol doesn't cover the access roads on the north side. There's a county garage about 8 miles north that I passed on my way here. Emergency vehicle maintenance depot. Should have diesel. This was coming together. Not neatly, not without significant unknowns, but the pieces were landing in sequence in a way that felt like more than luck. We need 2 days to prep, Shoup said, if we're doing this. We have 2 days, I said. Day 24. Preparation. The 2 days of preparation were the most organized things I've been part of in this entire situation, and I say that as someone who spent 18 years organizing transport operations. Shupe ran the supply split. What stays at the facility, what goes on the bus, what goes in the 2 sourced vehicles we'd brought in from the main road. He did it with the precision of a man who'd spent 12 years running international supply chains, and who had spent the last 2 weeks building toward exactly this kind of calculation. Farley and Claire scouted the county garage and confirmed the diesel. They came back with enough to fill both sourced vehicles and top up the bus, plus 3 additional cans. Aldous made final reinforcements to the bus. Not welding this time, just structural tightening, checking every modification we'd made, adding a few more inches of coverage to the underside with material from the workshop. Drew and Aaron did a final observation cycle from the lookout, confirming that the Barrett compound's patrol routes had not extended toward the facility access road. We had a clear window. Walto boxed his seeds. He was coming. He said without explanation that where the seeds went, he went. Owen Bracht stayed, as agreed, to run logistics at the facility. He shook my hand before I left and he said, "I'll make it worth what you left here." "I know you will," I said. The morning of day 25, we loaded up. 41 people on the move, the bus with 32, the 2 sourced vehicles with 9 between them, 11 people staying at the facility with Owen. It was as even a split as we could manage given resources and willingness. I stood at the gate with the manifest in my hand. Not the transport manifest, that was still in my shirt pocket, but the new one Shupe had made. A list of 41 names on a single sheet of paper, divided by vehicle. Roach was driving one of the sourced vehicles. I'd given him the keys without ceremony. He'd taken them the same way. Carla Weeks was riding in the second vehicle with Claire and 3 others, the hunting knife in its sheath at her hip. Jimmy Doss was sitting in the passenger seat of the bus, which was where he'd been since the first day, and he looked a little less frightened than he had on day 1, which was progress. Pete was in the seat behind me, the seat he'd always taken. He had his radio, the one he'd used to contact the checkpoint, and he'd reprogrammed it to the Clearwater Station frequency. Lily was in the front seat with her purple backpack. I started the engine. "Coulter," Roach called from the other vehicle. I looked over. "You've got a good engine," he said. "Don't abuse it." "Follow us," I said. The 280 miles to Clearwater Station took us 3 days, not 1, because the direct route wasn't passable and we had to navigate around 2 significant obstacles. A town where the infected density was high enough that trying to drive through wasn't a real option, and a bridge that was physically compromised and wouldn't hold the bus's weight. Day 25 to day 27. I'm going to compress these 3 days, because the important things are not the specific roads or the specific detours. The important things are, on day 25, about 60 miles north, we found a survivor group of 8 people in an abandoned grain elevator. They had food and no route. We took 4 of them, the ones who could fit, and left the others with fuel directions and the Clearwater coordinates. I don't know if they made it. I hope they made it. On day 26, we crossed through a stretch of the state forest where the infected were completely absent, not just low in number, absent, and the silence was so complete that people stopped talking for about 20 minutes, and the only sound was the bus engine and the wind through the vent. It felt like something ancient, like being in a place that had never had people in it. The trees were old growth, enormous, and the light came through them in long, late afternoon lines, and for a few minutes, I drove through that silence and felt something I can only describe as very specific and very quiet. On day 27, late afternoon, we found Clearwater Station. Clearwater Station. It was real. I want to say that first because I think at some level I'd been preparing to find it wasn't. 300 miles of uncertainty has a way of adjusting your expectations toward nothing. But it was real. It was a repurposed agricultural research facility, university affiliated, closed before the outbreak for budget reasons, which meant it was empty and intact. 16 buildings, including a greenhouse complex that was already running with a generator setup, a water well, a medical building that had been partially stocked with university surplus, and a perimeter fence that a team of people had been reinforcing for weeks. 312 people when we arrived. They added 41, and I watched the number get updated on a whiteboard in the main hall by a woman who appeared to be maintaining a live census. The man who ran the radio broadcasts was named Ford. Just Ford. He dropped his last name at some point, and nobody seemed to think this was strange. He was maybe 65, with a wild white beard, and the kind of calm that belongs to people who've done something terrifying and come out the other side of it, with their nerves adjusted to a higher threshold. He shook my hand. He looked at Lily, who looked back. "Badge number?" he asked me. I blinked. "You've got a badge," he said. 7741. I can read it from here. "Your corrections?" "Transport," I said. "What'd you bring?" 41 people. A modified bus, with tools and supplies. One man who can run supply logistics at a satellite location 60 miles south. A woman who knows the state forest, and a man who has seeds. 2 inmates who are now just people, more or less. A kid who's better than most adults at reading a situation. I paused. And 9 days' worth of diesel in cans. He nodded. "Anything else?" I thought about Pete's daughter, still uncontacted, Kevin Shoup's daughter Rachel, who was 7, Aaron Tillett's accounting of his own choices, Roaches, somewhere in Portland, Coleman at the reservoir, the 40 people on foot on the shoulder of the road, the note from the gas station. I went back for my brother. He was not my brother anymore. "Yes," I said, "but it'll take a while to explain." "We've got time," Ford said. He led us inside. "I want to finish this." Not finish as in the situation is over. It's not. But finish this recording. Because the dash cam that started running by accident on the highway at 8:17 a.m. on August 14th has been on for 27 days, and I've been talking to it when I could, and I think it's time to close the loop. So here's where things are. The facility at Clearwater Station has a medical team that includes 2 actual doctors and a third-year resident and a paramedic who used to work with Gareth at Camp Wyeth, which is a remarkable small-world fact that made both of them laugh in a way that had a lot of relief in it. Pete reached his daughter on day 29. She's alive. She's in a shelter group in Columbus, 70 miles from where he last knew her to be. She's with her roommate and her roommate's family, and she's okay. And the call was about 4 minutes long, because the radio contact is patchy and unreliable. And I stood nearby while it happened, and Pete didn't say much, but what he said was enough. Kevin Shoup's daughter Rachel is unlocated as of this recording. It is still on the list. It stays on the list. Tyler Roach is running one of the vehicle teams here. Convoy escort, resource transport, perimeter patrol. He's good at it. He asked me once, quietly, if I was going to write up a report on the inmates for whatever central authority might eventually exist. "Yes," I said. "What's it going to say?" "It's going to say what happened," I said. "All of it, exactly as it happened." He thought about that. That's fair. Brett Aldis is heading up a construction team. You give that man a problem that involves space and weight and force, and he is happy in a very specific, focused way. Doug Farley does logistics and route planning. Nobody asks about his pre-outbreak expertise in route planning, and he doesn't explain it. It works. Aaron Tillett does the things he does. Observation, analysis, fishing. He caught 11 fish on day 28. He wrote it in the log, along with a note that said, "Kyle would probably have been better at this." Carla Weeks is working with the medical team. She and the third-year resident have found a working language. Gareth, who is still at Camp Wyeth, we've been in radio contact, sends her questions about specific treatments, and she sends back answers. And the exchange happens with a precision that would not have been out of place in an actual clinical setting. Lily is in the facility's school program, which is being run by 3 teachers who were in the Clearwater group, and which has, as of last count, 22 students. She is learning mathematics and reading, and something the teachers are calling situational awareness, which involves identifying safe paths in a given environment. She is very good at it. She still has the purple backpack. I want to say something about the transport manifest. It's still in my shirt pocket. It's been in my shirt pocket for 28 days, through everything, folded and refolded and slightly damp from sweat and once from rain. It has the names of 6 inmates and 3 officers, and a destination that no longer exists, and an authorization from an authority that has no current operational status. I'm going to keep it. Not because of what it is legally, which is now essentially nothing. Not because it represents something about order or authority. Concepts that are currently being reconstructed from the ground up, and may not look like what they did before. I'm keeping it because it has 9 names on it, and every one of those 9 names is still alive, and in the situation I was handed at 8:17 a.m. on August 14th, 9 people, 1 bus, a highway full of infected and chaos and no good options. Keeping 9 names alive for 28 days and counting is the thing I was actually supposed to do. Not deliver, not contain, not transport from one place to another on a schedule. Keep alive. I think that was always the job. I just didn't know the full extent of the job description until they handed me the situation that revealed it. One more thing. On day 28, Ford asked me to start doing a formal daily briefing for the facility. Not because I knew the most, but because, he said, I'd seen a range of situations and outcomes over the past month that most of the people here hadn't, and because the people here needed someone who could stand up and tell them the truth without making it worse than it was, or better than it was. I'm not a leader, I said. I didn't say leader, he said. I said someone who can tell the truth without making it worse or better. I thought about that. Okay, I said. So that's where I am, as of what I believe is day 28 or 29. I've lost exact track again, which is a sign that things have stabilized enough that counting stopped being a survival mechanism. We're at a functional facility. We have a medical team, a growing operation, water, fuel, a perimeter that is regularly improving, and daily contact with Camp Wyeth and the water treatment facility, and 2 other survivor groups within radio range. We have Ford's census, which is now at 363 people and rising. We have a roadmap that is being updated continuously by people who are moving through the territory and reporting back. We have problems. Food production isn't up to full demand. The Barrett compound is still out there, and I don't know when its instability will express itself in a way that affects us. There are parts of the infection pattern I don't understand. The column of infected on the road, the signal from the hospital, the way some areas seem to have cleared and others seem to have densified. There are things happening that I don't have frameworks for yet. But we have a facility that is real, and a group of people who are, improbably, mostly choosing to be decent to each other. And I have a modified prison transport bus parked in the lot, with a tank of diesel and a welder's apron draped over the front bumper, ready for whatever comes next. I'm going to stop the recording now. I'll start a new one if something happens that needs to be on the record. That's how this works. Raymond Coulter, Transport Officer, Badge 7741. Day 28, or 29. Still moving.